Buddy, I call to order the Special Commission on Work Session for Budget. Today is June 9th, 2026. It is 3 p.m. Please stand and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So I understand we got a series of presentations. I'm not sure who we're looking for first. Do we need to do roll call? Is that correct? Please, roll call, please.
Here. Here.
Here.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Here.
Mayor Tate.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, presentations, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to kick off tonight with a strategic planning overview, as well as seeking some direction on next steps for staff and community and commission on strategic planning. We have Candace Galloway to lead us in our presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Candace Galloway, Director of Technology. Good to see you all. It's been a little bit since we've talked about some of the topics we're going to go over today, so some of it will be a refresher for some of you, and we're obviously have onboarded 2 new folks, and so there'll be some information to bring everyone along, hopefully get everyone on the same page and get some direction on where we take strategic planning next. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the framework that we've been working off of. We've been at this for a better part of almost 2 years now. We're going to talk a little bit about the survey that you all took and we incorporated with the new folks that are onboarded as well. We're going to talk a little bit about where we are today in the process, discuss a little bit about our benchmarking findings with some of the other strategic planning that's going on around us in other communities. Talk a little bit about what it means to us and what we're kind of looking at directionally, and then talk to you about some decisions that we're hoping to get some direction on from you on next steps. This is just a timeline. We started way back in the beginning of springtime of 24. We've had a number of workshops since then, and of course today is an updated workshop to continue those conversations. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the framework. We tried to keep it pretty basic, not overcomplicate the structure of what we've tried to design. So essentially, we started out with the basic framework of laying out our objectives and bringing in commission feedback and vision and strategic planning. So we've had a couple of workshops to bring to bear some of that feedback into the planning process. We've drafted objectives from that, and we built a 2-year strategic planning roadmap, which most of you have probably seen by now, but happy to, there'll be some other artifacts if you all want for me to pull together for the group so that you have those to take away. But that was put together, and then we from there, we started building out our planning around KPIs, or key performance indicators, in terms of how we're going to measure ourselves against our goals and objectives going forward from that initial strategic plan. We have gotten those objectives memorialized. We've got all the projects from a strategic standpoint aligned to the strategic pillars, and we have begun the process of building out our KPIs and metrics to try to measure against those projects and the goals that were outlined. So we're in that planning phase. We're kind of in between planning and implementation right now, and we're working through a number of aspects of this process. If you recall, the strategic planning pillars are community prosperity, operational excellence, resilience, recovery and sustainability, economic growth and development, and reliable infrastructure. And so let's talk a little bit about the survey findings. So if you all recall, last year, many of you took a survey. Our new folks just recently took that same survey. We asked for them to complete that as well, and we incorporated some of their findings together with the survey results we had recently gotten. And lo and behold, we are relatively aligned across the commission in terms of our core purpose. obviously serving residents and protecting the quality of life here in the community of St. Pete Beach. We clearly have values around fiscal responsibility. That's evident in a lot of the planning going on right now for us with you and internally. Service excellence is critical, right? So working to be the operational best that we can be as a community and what we deliver as outcomes for the community. Infrastructure and recovery are still very top priority for the city. So a lot of the work that we're continuing to do is in that space and will continue to be in that space. And then, of course, being proactive, resident-first governance, and maintaining community character. So these are all areas that you all align on from the feedback that we've received. We also have alignment around the overall priority ranking of the pillars and the work that's being done in those from the feedback we've seen. So there's still a fair amount of work happening in reliable infrastructure, and that will continue. And the later discussion today around budget's going to go into a lot of those projects. Recovery and resiliency and sustainability is still one of our top priorities, and we'll continue our work in that space. Operational excellence comes in at a close third. It's obviously important for us to improve and enhance the way that we deliver and think about continuous improvement in all of our operational disciplines so that we can better serve the community. And then there's community prosperity and economic growth and development. So a lot of alignment there from you all in terms of the feedback we're seeing. What the survey is telling us is that the foundation for building out a strategic plan exists. Our core purpose and responsibilities are relatively clear, and we have decent alignment across the commission as well as staff and city leadership around what those are. We're getting a lot more refined on those immediate priorities. We're going to talk a lot more about that later today. Of course, there's going to be differences around the pacing and the prioritization of work. I think that's where we need a lot of help as we go forward as a leadership team, is to get a lot more guidance around that prioritization and planning step. It's just as important to tell us what you want us to work on as it is to tell us what you don't want us to be working on, right? Because we can't do everything at once. So it's going to be pretty important that we focus on things that we're going to deprioritize as well so that we can be more successful on those things we are going to work on. So who we are now, where we want to be, obviously there's been a significant focus on preservation. We're still obviously a community that isn't going through redevelopment, so there's a lot of work in that space. So we're looking to kind of paradigm shift directionally to stay really in pace with the redevelopment that's going on. We're still focused on immediate recovery. We're not in blue sky, but we certainly have to think about blue sky days that are coming and the long-term planning and vision that comes with that. And so that's going to be critical as we think and move forward. Community input and decision agility. So we want to be more community input focused and being able to take that input and be agile in our approach in terms of how we use that input for actioning work, prioritizing, and delivering against that work. And then, of course, we're going to have the fiscal constraints and many more to come in that space. So we understand that that's critical as well. So what we heard from city leadership, so Francis and team and the assistant city manager have obviously spent a lot of time working with us on strategic planning goals. And for the next 24 months, what they're looking for out of us is to galvanize the community and organization around alignment on strategic direction and priority, and building a shared sense of that direction and buy-in from the staff at all levels within the city. We're also looking to do a better job from a communication standpoint, to start putting together a better cadence around what we're putting out, the type of information, how often, and to be as transparent as possible as we're going through this process. We're bringing people along as the sausage is being made, right? So there's a lot of moves, adds, and changes, but we want to be as transparent, but we also want people to recognize that things are changing as we are working towards delivery on these things. So transparency is going to be critical for the next for the foreseeable future. I'll just put it that way. The next 3 to 5 years, we are looking to build a lasting process that extends beyond really the commission as it stands today, right? We understand that people change, needs change, and we want to make sure that we can change with it, but also maintain the continuity of care and structure around a true strategic plan. And so we're looking to obviously extend our strategic planning beyond the 2-year roadmap that we have today, right? So we're going to be looking to build something lasting in that space. All right. We're also looking to make this a living document and a living process so that we come back to you on a regular basis, right? So we're not building something that goes in a binder on a bookshelf and collects dust. You know, the idea is to make something that we can work and collaborate together and make adjustments as we need to based on the challenges and the needs that the city brings to bear year over year. And then, of course, one of the key components that I think we need to do a better job as a leadership team is staff voice and ownership. So without bringing the staff along and giving them a voice in this process, it's very difficult for them to anchor themselves to the work and understand how their work is impacting the delivery in the community and the value that we bring to the community on a daily basis. So we're looking for staff to have skin in the game, and that includes their voice to be heard. All right, so really the next phase of the strategic planning, we're looking to move away from kind of those broad themes, individual perspectives, and recovery-focused priorities, right? We really do want to shift to a more long-term planning and strategic vision that incorporates clear prioritization from you all, top down, and has the ability to put together measurable outcomes that are meaningful to the community. And obviously, we want to, that operational excellence that I mentioned, the long-term execution and discipline is critical. So we know that that's going to be the way to succeed. So the process isn't really about identifying what matters. It's now about, deciding what matters most. And I think that's no more relevant than it is right now with all of the challenges we're dealing with from a fiscal standpoint and planning around that. All right, so where we are today, the strategic projects are mapped to our strategic goals. So as I mentioned, we have the pillars and goals, and all of the projects associated are mapped as such. We have got many of the KPIs started, but we are not prepared to bring those in front of you yet, but the team is diligently working on those to put together the KPIs and measures that are going to roll up for measuring the success of our projects. We've obviously got project leads, and departments are, starting to work through and identify what strategic success looks like. And then we will, of course, test and learn, right? We're going to learn from the progress we're making, some of the mistakes we're making, and we're going to test and learn and improve the process over time. One of the key things is using project tracking to show how dollars and cents are being spent. Pretty critical, and I think you're already seeing some of that, brought to bear in the feedback you're getting from Camden, from Public Services, from Finance, and other departments. We are working on developing some reporting dashboards out to you all so you can see from a strategic standpoint how these projects are progressing and where they are in relation to being complete and whether they're meeting their objectives and obligations. And then, of course, that accountability and transparency to the community and the commission in terms of what we're working on a consistent basis. So this was just meant to give you a little bit of a viewpoint in the first draft of a dashboard. So this is a very rudimentary dashboard, if you can see the screenshot here, which would show you the initiatives that are roll up to the high-level strategic plan. We can talk about that in a second. And then the KPI progress in terms of delivering against those initiatives at a pillar level. And this is not necessarily, when I say it's draft, it's very, very draft, meaning it's probably going to change pretty substantially by the time all's said and done once we get these KPIs developed. But I did want to bring at least, a show and tell so that you guys could see what's being put together, and we are putting a lot of work and thought into this process and what it's going to look like. The other item I think everyone has seen, but I'm going to open anyway, because these are two really important ways that we are trying to bring that transparency and reporting out to the community. You've got your CIP dashboard, which shows the portfolio of all of your projects, and Camden's team has done a fantastic job at building out what they wanted, putting together the content so that you could see the cost of these projects, the status, regular updates, and there's a lot of really great information here for the entire community to have access real time, right? So really critical one for us. I want to show you one more. This one is also very draft, so please know that it has not been signed off on by the permitting team in the department just yet, but it is a dashboard that they have in front of them for consideration, provided this comes up. 1 second. Oh, no, we don't have permission. Let's see, we'll give it one more second. If not, I will send around a link to it. It's actually pretty, it's a really comprehensive dashboard that we put together. Basically, there's 3 dashboards. There's an executive dashboard for public consumption that we'll put out on the website and we'll put out to you all on a regular basis. There is a departmental dashboard with several internal metrics about throughput and optimization of how the efficiency is happening within the team. And then there are an operational manager's dashboard as well, so they can look at by discipline and by department within the team. So this is inside of permitting and all the functions within the permitting department they'll be able to use for managing and effectively looking at throughput within their department. So we'll give it a second. We'll keep going. I don't want to waste time on that. If we can come back to it, we will. If not, I'll share after. All right, so this just gives another viewpoint on how we're measuring ourselves, to look at where we're spending our time from a project pillar standpoint. And clearly there's quite a bit of work being done in reliable infrastructure. That's where most of our projects, active projects, are today. And several are in the recovery and resiliency and sustainability as well. So you're still seeing the theme focused on recovery and resiliency and sustainability. Even though we're looking to transition to blue sky, there's still quite a bit of work that's being done in the space, and that will continue over, right there, 73% of the projects are still focused in those areas, and for the foreseeable future, those will continue to dominate our responsibilities to you. All right, so let's spend a minute. We can talk a little bit about this benchmarking work that we did. So when we started to look at what we thought mattered from a strategic standpoint to deliver to the community, obviously we wanted to first look and see what others were doing well, maybe what others weren't doing so well, and where we thought we fit into that in terms of the value we can bring. So what we did look at about 19 to 20 different communities. I have the list. I have lots of information about each and every one. If you would like to see it, I can put that to you. But what this is just a consolidation down of a handful that we looked at, some in our immediate area, as you can see, right? We've got a few focused right around where we live, Cape Coral, Dunedin, Largo. Palm Coast is on the other coast, but it's still Florida. And then the reason that we brought them and others like Surfside and Newport, Oregon in is because we wanted to look at some that were maybe not quite in the high level of maturity yet in their process, and we wanted to see if they're just getting their programs off the ground, what are the kinds of things that they're focused on first? What are the things that seem meaningful to their communities with small, we're a small footprint, small staff, small community. What kinds of things are they putting out, and how is that resonating with their community and their constituents? So that's why we ended up with a little bit of a smattering of some communities beyond local to us. In that 19 to 20, you're going to see many, many communities that are local to us for your review, right? But you can see here, these are all communities that have similar types of challenges that we do, and some similar size. Some are much larger. I think when we talked last, we talked a little bit about either Palm Coast or Largo, and somebody said, yeah, their budget's millions of dollars. And while that's actively true, I would arguably say that some of the things they're doing, we have already started doing, and we're going to probably surpass some of the things that they're putting out right now for their community. And it gives us at least a benchmark and an opportunity to see, again, what are other communities doing, how does it resonate, and how meaningful is it for their community. And then from a reporting maturity against some of those similar criteria when we were looking at the benchmarking, many of them are looking to have public scorecards or dashboards, right? Preferably things that maybe aren't static if we can, right? Have things that update more real time. You can see there 53% of the peers that we looked at have some capability in this space. We, obviously, our current state here in that yellow column, We have our CIP dashboard that we just looked at. We've got the permit dashboard that I was unable to show you, but you will see, which has a lot of metrics available to us to start really digging into the data and what the data is telling us in terms of our efficiencies within our department. So I feel like we're already well on our way in the public dashboard and scorecard direction. From an annual strategic report, this one was kind of unique. What I liked about it is several of these communities do put out an annual report, a strategic report. It's an accomplishments, summary, metrics by department, so it's pretty extensive in terms of what they put out. It is static, typically, but there is a lot of value, I think, in putting something together on a consistent basis that people can refer back to and leverage. And so it is something we're talking internally about. Does it make sense for us to produce something like this? Because if we're already getting the metrics and some of the other content from the areas that we just described, it probably will help, we'll be able to double dip and use some of that to fill in this information and produce something for the community to have. Department level report outs, that's already happening. Clearly, lots of the communities are doing that well. We do that, I think, fairly well, right? We've got a report that comes out every single week. That process is migrating so that it can align with strategic planning. So we're changing the way that's structured. I know that's very newly, minted, that we're going through that process, and that will continue to evolve. But I think it's something that we do rather well, and a lot of communities will start to potentially look at us maybe and use some of the things we're doing to aid their process. And then public project updates. There's been a heavy push by lots of communities to get some sort of portfolio management tool out there and in place. And of course, we've got that head and shoulders above many communities in that space. We're looking for, our current state I think is pretty good, but we're looking to obviously grow and mature this process over time. And you can see down at the bottom there, you've got your maturity levels. I would love for us to be in that level 3, target area where we've got some live dashboards, the KPIs, and some regular reporting, static reporting that comes out by department on a regular basis. So we're well on our way. All right, so obviously this is a cultural shift for all of us. It's not just a document or something that we're producing and putting on a shelf or bringing to you, but it's a culture shift in the way that we work. It's really trying to sharpen the focus on what we're working on as it pertains to the importance to the community and what we bring in terms of value from that work back to the community. So we want it to be all the way through, top down, every staffer, to be able to focus and understand how they matter essentially to delivering our strategic objectives. Obviously, we're moving to data-driven decisioning. Everyone's trying to work towards how can we better use our data. We have lots of systems with disparate data all over, but how can we use that? How can we analyze that to better our decision-making, better our ways to work? Many things to improve, right, in terms of running our business on data and sound decisions. Clarity of roles and priorities. I think priorities is critical. To me, it's one of the most important things that we'll do and we'll get from you all is very clear direction and priority. And then, of course, collaboration, innovation, and accountability, all the things that we want from an operational excellence standpoint to really move the city forward. All right, so we're going to talk about some decision and direction that we're hoping to get from you all today with regard to strategic planning next steps. So we're at a bit of a crossroads. We've spent the last better part of 2 years working on that 2-year strategic plan, the roadmap, the pillars, the goals. Now we're working on all that project alignment, those dashboards and reports that we've been talking about. And it's time for us to think about what the next steps are in this process and how we decide to fill those and to fulfill those and to get that work done. So we've looked at actually a couple of different ways to take strategic planning from here forward. One would be to bring in external help and have external resources assist us and aid us in taking our strategic planning to another level in terms of building out a longer-term strategic plan and vision, right? So those things, if you've looked at that strategic map, it's a 2-year roadmap, and we're mapping and we're driving to that. But what's the 3-year and the 5-year plan, right? And how do we incorporate the mission, vision, and strategic planning to start building out an actual plan that's beyond the 2-year? So that's something that we could potentially bring in. So we're going to go through these three options, but one would be to bring in an outside entity to help us do this. As you all know, we all have day jobs, so a lot of the work that's being done in this space is being done by myself, my peers behind me, managers within the city, but it's no one's dedicated job. It's just part of our job, right? And so bringing in outside experts to help us roll out a plan may be advantageous to get where we want to go, right? There's quite a bit of work that can go into that, and we'll talk about that in a second. Option B would be to continue what we're doing right now, which is continuing to advance this process as best we can with the time and the priority that we can, to continue to work and refine the existing plan and determine what the next steps are to bring the community along, resident engagement, staff engagement, and so on. And so we would be continuing to kind of work that process behind the scenes and bring this to you in a similar cadence to what we've been doing now. Obviously, we'd allocate time as staff as time permits. And then option C would be something of a hybrid approach, where we would potentially continue doing some of the work ourselves, but we would start to leverage maybe some outside help to get some community engagement, some focus group help, surveys, and to start bringing in more community voice into this process, because that's really the next step, and we haven't done that internally today in a way that's meaningful, and I think the community is owed that. And so we're going to need to come up with a way to accomplish that in a more meaningful way, and whether that's bringing in help or us doing it ourselves, I think that's a key component to making this stick in the long term. What you can see here is option A is going to take you through. I'm going to just talk a little bit about option A and option B for a second, and then we'll talk in more detail about that last option of a hybrid approach. So that option A would be that full external engagement, more of a turnkey process. We would turn over a lot of the legwork and the day-to-day management of the process itself. We would bring in process experts to help us. They would go through a lot of facilitation with the community through a number of means: focus groups, surveys. They would have focus and strategic planning workshops with you all as well. We would, of course, be there, but they would help us facilitate that process. So it would be more of a turnkey, soup to nuts kind of approach. Obviously, it's a much larger investment if you were to consider that. It ranges right now anywhere from 62 to all the way up to 200. Some of these things can be a la carte, so we have choices to make, right, where we can choose. We don't have to bring in an entire package. And so depending on who we chose and what we wanted to do, we could certainly look at ways to break this up a little bit differently. But one of the things I think that is important to call out here is it's a wide range, right? $62,000 to $200,000. It's a pretty significant jump. I think this is the difference between getting someone who is very strategic planning focused and also has a lot of that rigor from a compliance. And if you've heard of Baldrige, you may have heard Devin has talked about that in a number of ways, and some of the communities she's worked in has been Baldrige certified. And so this would potentially be able to bring in a company and an organization to bring us to that level in terms of certification compliance with regard to strategic planning process. The alternate to that is a company that actually many of the communities around us are using. Collaborative Labs is their name. They have actually worked at Treasure, Dunedin, Tarpon, Hillsborough. I mean, almost I can't find a community they haven't worked at, where they do a lot of facilitation for communities like us, but it's not quite as rigorous in terms of that compliance side of things. So again, we can talk a lot more about those pieces and parts and what makes sense depending on directionally what you guys want to see from here. Option B, as I mentioned, would be just really us continuing to do what we do. We're already working through a lot of the metrics and the KPIs as a team, so we would continue to refine that. Of course, we would try to preserve some momentum, right? We want to move this along, but clearly it's going to have to be prioritized with everything else. I still think that the community input is critical, and so we'd have to find a way to bring that to bear, even if we chose to go with option B. And so option B doesn't have a plan for that right now, so we would have to go off and kind of sit together and think through that. So option C is really our recommended approach. which would be more of a hybrid path for this process. It gets us a little bit more direct engagement with workshop, community, focus group, surveys, compiling all that information, doing all of the analysis, and bringing that information to bear to our conversations with you all, the community, and ourselves. What we would get by doing this is obviously the community voice, which we're after. Potentially the third-party credibility of having an outside entity still help facilitate some of this process, right? Sometimes they're neutral, there's no bias, they're not anchored to other existing priorities and projects and initiatives that we all are. So, you know, someone may perceive or may be perceived that there's a value to that neutral kind of unbiased facilitation. We would get the tangible artifacts for the community-facing deliverables. Obviously, it wouldn't just be internal planning documents and internal planning processes. And then, of course, we would still be able to continue to preserve the momentum we've gotten, but hopefully we would exponentially accelerate some of the planning to bring the community along with the process. If we chose to do that, we made a recommendation here of some of the a la carte options that I had talked about a minute ago, with having a commission priority workshop. The surveys, that should say 200 respondents, so that's a typo. And that's an estimate that may come down, the 4,000 there that you see on that line item. And then we could potentially do less than 2 focus groups. We could do 1 if we felt that was enough, and that would potentially bring that dollar amount down. And then, of course, if we decided we wanted to go through the visioning and strategies as a team, then we would have a process to do that, which would bring in, you could see there, up to 40 stakeholders. So it'd be a full facilitation. We could bring staff, you know, commission, leadership, and so on. So what we're looking for is a little bit of guidance. Certainly, you know, there was a lot said, so if there's questions that you want to get more information about something, but we're looking for some guidance and or direction if there's more you want to know about any of this that we need to go off and do to bring back. I think that's probably, oh, sorry, this last slide is kind of a comparison. It's really just another depiction of what you just saw, line by line. If we went with option A and C at the top, you can see we've got the priority workshop goes with A and C, so that's the full or the hybrid. The only 2 that don't roll up to that would be the phase 2 and phase 3, where it's A only. So if we do the full turnkey outsource for bringing strategic planning in, some of those items roll up, but it's still the hybrid option at the 40K if you went with everything that I outlined in that prior slide, or anywhere from the 62 to 197 if we went the full turnkey with an outside entity to help us. And I think that's it. What's in the appendix is a lot more detail about that benchmarking and some of the other stuff. So,
Okay.
any questions or concerns, comments? Happy to answer.
Commissioner Maldonado.
I think I was the only one that was smart enough to put this up for the Q&A, so I'll go first. So, first of all, let me say thank you. I know that this is not easy. A lot of it is notional, and when you're talking about strategy, you're talking about not just a plan, but an actual living operational document. So it's hard to envision where we want to go when we're starting from scratch. I will say that I do lean towards the hybrid approach. That I think that not only will this ensure community alignment, more importantly, it allows us to have an unbiased approach. Otherwise, it strictly is, staff, leadership, and the commission. Without that community alignment, I think that we're not doing ourselves a service. We want this to outlast the present commission, future commissions, but we want this to be a long-term operational planning document. Speaking for myself, thank you.
Yeah, I had a few questions. So I agree with the community engagement comment that Commissioner Maldonado just made, but I think it's the process that we use for that. So I would be very interested in a industry standard process rather than something that we make up, because you mentioned structure and focus as part of the process of community input. But I can see where those kind of things go wrong. Like, I don't get the 2% input that you talked about. That's 200 people are basically telling us what the community thinks. That doesn't really make sense to me. I think it would be better to go with the commission input than 200 people from the community, because I don't understand the process, I guess, of how we would really have would it be a random sampling from the community? Do you understand how these things work?
Yeah, we haven't gone into grave detail about what that survey, I think we get to shape that ourselves about what we want that to look like. So we can have as much input to that as possible. But we would also, if we leverage either of these organizations, they're very familiar with these processes, and this is what they do and all they do. So I think they would be able to give us more guidance around the best approach to implementing those surveys, any of the focus groups, and or the workshops with the commission and other leadership.
Okay, I've got a few more questions, but I'll stop
Absolutely. Okay.
I don't know how we turn these things off.
Yeah, you listen. Is it okay if just speak when you're, I'll kind of look and just kind of nod at me and I'll go, okay, yeah, okay, so, yeah.
Smart enough to pick, I was, as Commissioner.
Grab your little,
To grab those, I don't think.
Where are they at?
Yeah.
Where's the queue things at?
There isn't
Behind the
one.
lectern?
Oh, they might be
Oh, are they-
sitting,
oh,
maybe
that
getting
was-
charged. They're probably behind your screens there.
you go.
Apologies. Probably charging.
Maldonado's right, we're not smart enough.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, this is mayor, so I'll turn it over.
Mine, I don't know, I guess all good.
Okay, so
Please.
I have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. So, I guess in your experience or in the city manager's experience, is moving forward with something like this more than what we've done? In your experience, do you see that as being something that has value and, because the important thing is what is the end result, right? Like, the important thing is not a strategic plan for its own sake or a strategic plan for a beautiful strategic plan's sake. It's will it create a better outcome where either things are functioning better in the city, or the community is happier, or we're more efficient with our dollars? I mean, does this sort of thing generally result in a better outcome?
I'm going to say absolutely yes. I haven't worked in an organization. You are going to realize a high performance, very highly focused, if you use it. The key is you create the plan, if you create it properly, which you're hearing us say, they don't work unless you have community input and you have your employee input, because the employees have to deliver and they got to get bought in, and we need to know what the community really wants. And the key is that they stand the test of time. So you want to minimize disruption in that focus. And when you onboard new commissioners, if you have a very focused path to say this is what we've developed, and it's not, it wasn't anchored in pet projects or the exciting project of the week. It's really anchored in a longer term vision, and once you get that momentum, they're very, very, very effective. And I do think cities perform better. They make better financial decisions. They tend to be much more fiscally solvent, and so it just brings it all full circle, so you can see the big picture.
Okay, thank you. And then I think I was going to comment about Commissioner Kazi's questions about the number of residents who are involved, or feedback from number of residents. And, my comment about that would be that one, I don't know that we can compel as high a percentage of people as we might like to be involved or to respond to some kind of survey. There's going to be some percent of people that will be able to get involved, no matter what our best intentions are of getting feedback from community members. My concern would be more that we make sure that whatever community input we get is as broad as possible and as much as possible from the people we don't normally hear from. I think we can all tell you what about 25 or 30 people in the city that we hear from all the time think is important. I know what those people think, and I know that those people would very much want to be involved in in the process of a strategic plan and being involved. What I'd really like to know is what 200 people that I've never heard from think in the city. And so, again, because we can't compel people to be involved or to let us know their opinions, to me, the tricky part would be, getting input from the people we don't normally hear from and getting more of a general feeling of what does the community at large, what is the community at large concerned with, not just what are the people that are most vocal concerned with.
Commissioner Robinson, please.
So I totally get the need for a strategic plan. What did we have before?
Well, I've been here just over 3 years. When I got here, there was a little bit of a process. I remember distinctly sitting down with prior leadership. They pulled up a deck. There was strategic areas and a spreadsheet tracking some of the high-level initiatives. I do remember there was probably 1 or 2 presentations when I had just recently joined, where we brought some of that to the commission for discussion. But outside of that, I'm not sure what was really done on a consistent basis or more thoroughly.
So you're saying we really didn't have a strategic, or we haven't, in the history of St. Pete Beach, we haven't had a strategic plan.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, in my time, I haven't seen anything of significance.
Okay. And now, even though we've staffed up, more so than we've ever been, we lack the bandwidth to do this ourselves.
So not necessarily, right? The way I'm looking at it is we actually do have some bandwidth. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to present to you what I'm presenting today, which is hopefully, good information for you all to start thinking about as we go forward. So we do have some capacity. I think what we're really lacking is dedicated resources to bring the community voice forward. We don't have anybody this is their sole
Now,
focus.
When you're talking community voice, define that. What kind of community voice are we looking for? Are we looking for comp plan? Because we already have a comp plan, and we went through that where we were going to redo it, and then we couldn't do it because it's SB 180. Now, are we talking for capital improvement projects? Because right now, as I see our city, maybe I'm wrong, but we are still recovering from a hurricane. And there's basic 101 infrastructure items that we need to do before we start some other capital improvement visioning process that I think, which is what we're looking at here, right? Going through, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And we thought we all could tackle this, but now we're saying we can't tackle this. Is that what I'm hearing? Because I don't really know what I'm hearing, to be honest with you, from a strategic plan. I get that we need one, but I don't know where we're driving from, how difficult it could be to get, we're looking at a few things here. We're looking at our infrastructure, and we're looking at least getting out of our hurricane devastation side of things and getting back to more normal and being able to provide basic city 101 items to our residents. So I'm not sure what else we're looking for to get feedback from our residents. And I'm just going to say, for the 42,000, where it was 40,000 on one slide, now it's 42. So the $42,000, what are we going to cut out to pay for that? Because that's kind of where we're at. We're looking at a budget, and we're knocking things off. So where are we coming with the 42,000 for, if that's where we're going, or the 197,000? I just hate to get in something with 42, and then next year get hit up again for another 42, and the year after that for another 40. Oh, sorry, there's been a price increase, 50 for that. And again, this is an estimate on what this is going to be.
Yeah.
So can we not design in-house our own, at least an initial survey to our residents for what we're looking for visioning? I mean, we've got to have maybe 10 items here that we're going to say, what are your priorities? Pick your top 5, pick your top 4. I mean, I think we can do that from a city standpoint.
Understood.
And I think we have, if we don't, I know what we have, smart enough people in the city that have marketing backgrounds that could probably volunteer some time to maybe put together something that we could put out.
Yeah.
That is my input. I'm not trying to be a Scrooge. I'm not saying, I'm just saying we are under tight constraints, and I'm not really understanding why we can't accomplish what we've always accomplished. And if it's gotten more difficult or less difficult, I mean, I know we're putting dashboards in place, and that's where we're looking at these metrics and things to that effect, and that's great. And that's something that needs, if we're saying that's what we need the help with, then say that's what we need the help with, not everything else.
Yeah.
I'm a cut to the chase person. I'm always cut to the chase scene, just want to know the bottom line on it. So are we looking at help with the dashboard and get the KPIs, or what are we looking at exactly?
So I don't think we're looking right now for help with the dashboards and the KPIs. I think we're looking for help to drive the process. And so all the things that you just described are 100% valid and true. They all make sense to me. And we are working towards this process, whether we bring help in from outside or not. We're going to keep working towards this because there is value in doing it. I think what we were looking for is potentially if you all saw enough value to accelerate it and bring in an outside entity to help with some of that. That's partially why I didn't want to come here and say, let's go and, do option A and do a turnkey process and spend $200,000. I mean, in fairness, I don't want to stand here and sound tone deaf. We understand the challenges this community is facing. And it's very important to be fiscally, responsible about every single decision and every single dollar that we use and for service delivery. So I think where we would get a lot of value is to accelerate the process. To your point, can we do our own survey? Can we deliver something like that and do our own analysis? We certainly can. And this isn't going to preclude us from doing that if you all choose to go that route and stay with option B. It does not mean we will not work on those things. It just will likely not be in an accelerated fashion. It may take us a little bit longer because we won't have dedicated people working.
So we could pick this up at any other time. We could try it out on our own, and then we could pick this up later.
You could. Absolutely, you could.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I usually let everybody get all their questions out, but I'm going to jump in just because I'm hearing a few things, and I will say that I would anticipate that any surveys that we do will be statistically valid, and if these companies do that, I've worked for Nielsen, for example, in the TV rating side, and I know that they do surveys of thousands of people off of hundreds of people, right? So I think it's statistically valid if assuming they have the right technologies. I will say this: I'm listening to what my other fellow commissioners, certainly to my right, specifically are saying is we've got. I certainly would love to hear the voice of the people that we don't get emails from all the time and don't have sitting in this room as well. I think we lack some input from people that either whatever their rationale is, they don't come and sit in the room with us, they don't email us, but they do have an opinion about the future of our city. And I think they're, assuming we could get a statistically valid survey, and if I'm looking down and saying $4,000, that seems reasonable to make sure that we get community input into our decision-making process. Do I think that we need to spend the whole 42? I'm not quite sure, frankly. I'm of the mindset this is a short, let's make sure that we gather community input. Let's make sure that we've got a good process to analyze that and say, we think that, community tells us these are the top 2 or 3 things, and can do a little deeper analysis into it. Do I think we need to go as far as some of these other things in here? I don't. Even on the hybrid path, to be frank with you, I'm looking at 4 to 11. Whether I don't know that I need a commissioner workshop. I'll bet you we all kind of have heard enough about what we kind of personally feel and what I think we get. We get all the same emails. I think as a general rule, we get a lot of the same emails. So I think for me, it's a much more slimmed version of this hybrid. But to me, the only really the primary thing I would personally love to hear is what Commissioner Marriott said as well, is a survey that gets to the people that we don't hear from every time, right? And with regards to how many that is, theoretically, I imagine we could survey, and I'm making this up, but I'm just saying, if we're worried about the sample size, we could survey 400 and then pick a random 200 out of it, right? And do an analysis on the random 200. If we don't get enough people, we want 200, we don't get 200 on our asking of 200. We ask 400, we'll get 220, and then we pick a random 200 out of there, right? So I think there's ways to do this that would give us input. And listen, I'm not afraid of the 4,000 number. I'm afraid of the 42,000 number for what Commissioner Robinson said. We've got really important money decisions to make here, and I'd rather be very frugal about what we do with something that either we can do on our own, you know, with more time, or accelerating, at least to feel comfortable that we understand that the community is at least giving us some input through some mechanism. So me, I'm looking at a hybrid of about $4,000 to $10,000 kind of thing, not a hybrid at 42,000 personally. That's just my recommendation here, because I do want to understand what the community's saying and make sure that we hear different voices, but I don't think we need $42,000 to feel like we've got a vetted set of data.
Fair enough.
I know there were other questions. I don't know which of you came
One
first.
comment, I believe we'd be looking at a audience of about 10% of the population or the properties.
We could,
Usually it's
so
about 10%.
Most of the analysis I've done, but we could get some very specifics, was in the 3 to 5% range, 3 to 8% range. But if we could get, it would be great if we could get 10%, right? That would be fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know which one of you gentlemen was first, so
I'll go first. Mine will be brief. So I echo the comments of the mayor in terms of cutting this down to the basic needs versus wants, but to Commissioner Robinson's, I guess, question stand with bandwidth, I do have concerns with overtasking the staff with more strategic stuff when they're so focused on tactical and operational level things. So I think that's you were talking a little bit more about the operational, tactical level stuff, in terms of what it is that we need to be doing now. The focus on this is in end states, right? It's trying to find the means and the ways to get to those end states. But my number one concern is to have an unbiased approach. And I think that if staff does that we're going to have blind spots. It's a cultural thing as well. Each commission has its direction, and I would say even directional input to the staff. And this has to be a very long-term, beyond us approach. So I do think that if we find the right balance in how much money that we want to invest in this, that the return on investment will be worth, the squeeze. But again, 42,000, that would be all the bells and whistles. We probably don't need that. It is a valid point that we need to be very mindful of where we're spending money, how much money. But I'm just really concerned with the unbiased approach on this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Ghazi.
Well, just coming through the election process, going to every door in District 3, it's like 1,700 doors. And I would say I probably talked to 80% of the people, and a lot of them more than one time. And I heard the same 2 or 3 things from every single door. So I understand that I have a good sampling. But I would not have very much confidence at all if I just picked it randomly even 2% of those and went and asked them about it, and until I found 2% in the district that I would get any version of the same information that I have. So I think the structure and focus of the thing is what's important, and everything that everyone said is exactly true. I agree with every single thing that we've set up here. So maybe it's true that a professional approach would work, but I don't know about this sample. And then how I agree with Commissioner Robinson, for example, I think that it's pretty clear from what I've heard from our district that people are most frustrated about stormwater and permitting. So, and I don't know if we were faced with those challenges. That's the biggest expenses we have. It's pretty obvious that's where we need to figure out how to skin that cat, if you would. So I think that's it for me then. That's just
Is there an option D?
So far.
I think there is an option D.
I think we need to talk about an option D, right?
Yeah,
Which is,
absolutely,
for
absolutely.
me, I think it's, well, listen, I'm gonna try and facilitate here, and I don't know if this is appropriate for my role, but I think to me, it's some subset of option C, and I say a subset, that provides enough value, provides enough transparency and unbiased, kind of research, but not overdone from a fiscal perspective, and lets us hear new voices, right? And so I think for me, that's where the value kind of comes through. I think for me, if we can't do our own survey, I'm just looking at the four of these options. And by the way, the survey is also the least expensive, and I think the most valuable, personally. So, I'm a fan of including at least a survey, whether that's we do it in-house or whether we outside source it. I would suspect if we try to do it in-house, we don't have the expertise and sample size and those kind of things that would be relevant to get done here. So for me, I think the item 2 under option C is a viable piece. I'm less convinced that the others are critical or needed.
To me, it's completely fair and makes sense. And what I love about this, the whole proposal and the discussion is it's completely a la carte. Everything here is interchangeable. We can choose what we feel is most relevant, most valuable to the current process and where we are. And you can also choose to not go that route and continue on the path that we're on. And I want you to know we're going to continue to work the entire process, right, to the best of our ability. And we're not putting it down. We're just saying it won't move as fast. And so I think that's the beauty of having it so a la carte like this.
And I think, just to point out, this is part of the process tonight.
Yes.
Yep.
Because if you're not bought into our approach, then a year down the road and we get asked, well, why didn't you think of option E,
Right.
or C, E, F, G. So we're in this together, and being transparent up front on the process, and that we're all rowing in the same boat.
Right.
And then we can pivot as we go together, not any blind spots from staff or the team or the commission.
And I will echo a little bit of what Commissioner Causey said. I mean, I got the benefit in the last 3 months of going most of the island, right? And so, I heard a lot of the same things, and I suspect if we did a survey that was broad enough and statistically valid enough that we would hopefully hear the same kind of things. If not, then we would question the validity of the survey, right?
We would, yeah.
So, I think there's some value there. I think that also, I know one of the things that's maybe stated, and I'll just restate it here. Now we've got commission input, we've got input from staff, and now we've got input from the community. If we pull one more piece in, again, I will suggest the survey might be a piece to pull in. And I've always, not only this strategic thing, I would love to find us a way to kind of survey the community at very basic intervals on whatever we're discussing, not just the strategic plan, right?
Right.
And so where should we be going on these different topics? So I would love I'd love to find a way to be able to gather community input on a regular basis, and perhaps a survey might give us a way to understand how to do that for future endeavors as well.
That's a really great call out. Okay.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Robinson, didn't see you.
Well, I believe, too, that the strategic vision is going to change, too, once we fully get to a recovered state. So that will change as well.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, I definitely know we have some action items to, go back to the drawing board on a few things, discuss internally direction here. But I think we've gotten a lot of great feedback. I really appreciate you guys. That's the whole point, is to bring it forward, to let you all weigh in and let us know what you want to do. And I think we've laid the foundation, so we'll be in a good position to figure that out from here.
Thank you. Do you have the information you need, or do you need any? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
all.
very much appreciate your time. And I know these aren't easy to put together, so we appreciate all the staff work on these. So thank you.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Commission. My name is Devin Schmidt. I'm the Finance Director for the City of St. Pete Beach. I'm here to take you through our budget workshop number 2. So what we have on the agenda today is we're going to give you an overview of the property tax landscape, since we had some changes last week in regards to that. We're going to be looking, as we continue to build out this budget, we're inviting you into the kitchen, if you will, to help us determine what recipes we need, what ingredients we need, and how we want to build out this budget. So we're going to be looking for feedback from you all on the rankings of our CIP projects. And I'm going to turn it over to our Public Services Director, Camden Mill, to take you through that. we're going to be looking for a revenue strategy direction that has the Finance Budget Review Committee recommendations, and then we're going to share our strategy of building the fiscal year 27 budget. So starting off, we're looking at, this briefing is just going to walk the commission through the property tax constitutional amendment that passed the legislature on June 2nd. What it means specifically for St. Pete Beach, and this is an information item only. We don't need any action from you this afternoon. So what legislature passed? This isn't everything in what passed, but this is really the headlines of what we're looking at. The homestead exemption is climbing from today's $50,000 to $150,000 next year and $250,000 in 2028. But that's really only on the non-school portion of the bill. A change was made in the committee that protects school district taxes from being cut, which approximately created that statewide revenue impact. It cut it in half. The two other pieces that matter for us is the cap and how fast non-homestead assessments can rise. That drops from 10% to 5%, and new residents have to wait 5 years before they get that bigger exemption. So this will be on the November ballot, and we'll need a 60% approval to pass. So this impacts our city in two ways, and it's important to kind of separate those out. So first, the bigger exemption shrinks the taxable base, so we collect the same, we collect less, at the same millage. It only touches our homesteaded properties, which we know is at about 39% of all of our parcels. Second, the comparison, or the companion bill that was implemented is how we set the rate. So it pins the simple majority ceiling to that rolled back rate and strips out that growth factor that's used to let that levy drift up every year. So to raise the revenue back up, the commission would need to have a supermajority vote, 4 out of 5, or a referendum. So these are our city figures from the Pinellas County's revenue dashboard, and specific to the city of St. Pete Beach. At today's rate, the city collects about $15.2 million in property taxes. This exemption increases the cost to about $1.1 million in 2027, or roughly 7%, and about $1.6 million in 2028. That's just under 11%. The reason why is because our tax base is, again, that 61% taxable is non-homestead, so that's going to be our hotels, our vacation rentals, and our second homes, which will keep paying the property taxes in full. The exemption only erodes at that 39% that is homesteaded, and that's why we're showing these figures. It's important to note that we are tracking this pretty closely, and these numbers are shifting. So if you've seen different ones through the Florida League of Cities or other places, we're going off of what the property appraiser has. That's our best information that we can point to today. Next slide. So the data that we have here was gathered using any of our approved commission agendas. And then we also looked at what our current revenue is and forecasted that against the Pinellas County's property appraisers website. And so the point of this slide is really to show you, while we track kind of our current fiscal landscape, we're also tracking any potential growth. This would be a 20-year look, and revenues would not be recognized unless these are redeveloped. But regardless, we know we are a city that is doing a lot of redevelopment, and we expect some revenue growth. And this really plays into when we're looking at how we're going to strategically fund infrastructure, and as well, this plays into the current potential changes with our property taxes. So this is an illustrative slide for you, so you're able to kind of see what we're tracking and how we're forecasting out. So with the bill, previously property taxes or ad valorem could have been utilized for anything that this commission would dedicate them to. This changes that in the sense that we can only use it for the purposes that are listed there for public safety, natural resources, education and schools, bonds and debt service, infrastructure, and employee retirement. And you can see here that we have on the slides there that are listed in gold, a lot of that section represents our internal services departments. So we were already in the process of building out a cost allocation model, and so that will be part of this budget process as well, since many of these support functions are required by either statute or operational necessity. These are indirect costs that we'll be putting forward as part of the budget process, but we just wanted you to be able to see that this is some of the nuances that we're tracking with this. So what this means for our budget building, I've talked about the gap. We have that higher approval threshold that's required to pass an increase. So anything above that rolled back rate, and the rolled back rate is the millage rate that would generate the same property tax revenue as the prior year, using the new year's taxable values, excluding any new construction additions or improvements. Quality of life and administrative services may require different revenue sources as we're looking at this budget. So as those total property tax dollars fall and restrictions on what we can use those for, the funding for library, resident services, and administration must come from other sources. So either parking revenue or cost allocations as a few examples. Budget balancing strategies, we'll be looking at expenditure reductions, fees. We've talked a lot about the fees with right sizing our enterprise funds to eliminate that property tax subsidy for all of our enterprise funds. Of course, the commission, so they choose, could increase the millage, and we could look at exploring reducing capital project funding, and we have that slide that we'll talk about a little bit later on for our revenue options. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Camden Mills, our Public Services Director, to take you through our capital improvement plan.
Before you leave, Devin, do you have any questions? Sorry, for Devin.
Commissioner Marriott.
Yeah, I have a couple questions for you, Devin. The first one on the slide that shows what the revenue from new development or redevelopment would be. So am I reading that correctly, that like just the Serrata development would pay for, would the increase in tax revenue would be about half of what we would be losing?
Correct.
If the budget, or if the ad valorem exemption passes in November?
Yes.
No.
that's right.
Okay.
No, she's not reading it right.
No.
No, so the current tax is 401. You use Serrata as the example.
Okay, so the new
So
tax.
it's
the
one,
difference-
it's
the
with
difference is
170 more.
2,000. It's not, the new tax number isn't the additional, it's just. the
Correct.
new- Okay.
Sorry. Thank you,
Okay.
City Manager.
All right. Okay, thank you. And then my other question for you is the rollback rate. Historically, the rollback rate is the rate that allows you to collect the same amount of money, even with changing in property values, right? So how is that going to, or do we know yet how that would be affected by a higher exemption? Like if that passes in November and the exemption is higher, is that rollback, I mean, the rollback rate can't possibly be high enough to keep our revenue the same as it was before. So what, I mean, do we have any idea what we would anticipate, how that's going to get managed, or is it the county that sets the rollback rate?
It is the
Okay.
county, and we get that figure on July 1st. So at our next workshop, we'll be talking a lot about property taxes and what that looks like. If we get anything in advance of that, we just intend to try to share this information with you all. This was hot off the press last week, and part of the delay of the presentation, so we apologize for that. But with all of these changes, we just want to make sure we're keeping you informed.
Sure. Yeah, well, and that wouldn't come into play for a whole nother year if that were to pass in November. So I was just curious if there had been any
Not that I've heard of or
talking
seen.
about what that would look like.
It'll probably
Yeah.
be higher than the typical rollback rate because homestead exemptions. You'll typically have a higher potential millage rate.
Yeah.
And you can't exceed that now unless you have super majority under the statute too. You'll have to have a super majority, but it'll be a higher number than you can go to. Currently, you can go to a higher than rollback rate with a super majority, but now you'll need it just to exceed the rollback rate. I think it was 120, 130% or 110% more, but now it's just going to be the rollback rate.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for you, please. Just clarification on back one slide, I think it was. Commissioner Merritt, two more, I'm sorry. Right here. There, this one, thank you. Right, what we said is the kind of in the gold, the new tax per year. Essentially what you're telling me is I have to take new tax per year minus current tax to get what the delta is, right? Even at that, I think I'm looking at 2.2 million delta, overall, once all this comes to play, just to make sure that we're at least aligned. And then I'm reading the right side to say any additional development. This is traditionally what we'd expect annually on a traditional development of mid-scale, upscale, or luxury, right? Okay. And then one more question for you. The 207 to 1.14 billion. Will you please just maybe go a little more detail on that and help me understand what that's conveying?
That's talking about our total taxable value across those 5 projects. So when you're looking at how that millage, it's every 1 million in new taxable value equals about $3,091 per year to the city.
Okay. So what's the 1.14 billion imply? That's maybe what I'm trying to understand where that's going to.
That's the value of those 5 hotels.
Oh, 207 million off of 1.14 billion value?
Just took the 5 and you put them on fair market value. How much are these hotels worth? And you added them 1.14.
After they're redeveloped.
Yeah.
Are you assuming that the 1.14 billion is the assessed taxable value? Is that what you're alluding to, or?
Right, correct.
Okay, got it.
Proposed new based on the investment and the redevelopment, the
Gotcha.
value of
Okay.
the increase.
Based on the 1.14 billion assessment assumed, we would assume to get 207 million.
Something like 200 million a hotel
Okay.
is what they're worth.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Robinson.
And I just want to point out to everybody, the trade winds is 20 years, and we don't see that until we don't realize the revenue till the end of 20 years.
Yes.
Well, it would be incremented in as different stages of the process of the project were finished, because it would be reassessed along the
Correct.
way.
This is a
Yeah.
20-year forecast.
Right.
Based on the approval of
The-
projects
I mean,
we
the-
have.
20-year.
Right.
And it does get reassessed every year, just like,
Right. Both the trade winds and the Serrata would, I mean, those, that's income that's being held up in lawsuits, so
Understood.
And just what, the growth rate did you use on that?
So when we were looking at the growth rate, we were just looking at for every $1 million, it's taking that 3,091 a year to the city, and that's how we're arriving at that. Utilizing the Pinellas County's website, you can go in there and look at under their advanced search and see every property, and so it's taking that with what the commission has approved, and then it is creating a forecast for us. Now, we know forecast even over 3 years starts to get blurry, and so looking at a 20-year, I wouldn't say that these are definitive and this is what we're going to land with, but it's certainly just wanted to provide any new development, when Publix, if that comes back online or any of those redevelopment projects come back online, we're going to recognize more additional revenue to the city.
Right, and same with the homes.
Yes,
well,
Any
unless they're
purchases.
homesteaded.
the homes, yeah. I mean, the homesteaded homes
Non-homestead.
that are being rebuilt by people who are their property tax aren't going to go up at all because of the disaster provision from the tax assessor. So the only increase is homes that are selling, right?
Right, purchases and rebuilds for.
And we
new
don't know
purchases.
how many of those homes that were second homes that maybe weren't homesteaded will turn into primary houses that are then homesteaded also.
Commissioner Causey.
I just wanted to highlight orders of magnitude here. So we're talking about a cut due to the homestead would be working towards say up towards 1.6 million less. And then over a 20-year period, we'd be working up towards 2.1 extra million dollars because of redevelopment, right? But then we are trying to do hurricane recovery and drainage and stormwater and wastewater, and we're looking at over that same period of time about $250 million. And maybe just for next year, I've heard numbers between $37 million and $60 million. So I don't think that the cuts due to the property taxes or the increases of redevelopment over that period of time we're talking about are really going to solve our biggest problems that we have. That's just a highlighted point I wanted to make.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'll be back up in a moment.
All right, I want to just set the stage for and introduce Camden Mills Public Services Director. He's going to walk you through tonight the prioritization list of the current capital project list. And tonight, I'm hoping to keep you all at the very high policy level of helping us guide whether generally the projects that are listed on here are that you agree that they should continue to be funded and continue to be invested in, or not. And so that's this exercise tonight is to help us create funding for fiscal year 27, not solve for 20 years of infrastructure. So whatever you fund means we're going to start working on it, or we're going to continue working on it with an eye towards another workshop someday to help us solve for our 200 million plus infrastructure deficit. And with that, I'll turn it over to Camden.
Thank you. So as we get into these rankings, just to give a little bit of background here, so we had 10 different scoring criteria that each of the projects were ran through. So you can see those at the bottom of this slide here and their associated point weight. In total, there was about 100 points total that were evaluated. Couple things to note, this isn't a perfect science. The criteria tries to encompasses as many nuances that we need to consider as possible, but of course there's going to be some nuances that we can't capture, but at least this gives us a consistent framework and a structure that we can evaluate from. Two, as City Manager mentioned, we really need, Commission's feedback in your direction on priorities to make sure that we're aligned as we move through proposing a budget in the next coming months. And then lastly, just note, if a project wasn't scored very high, it doesn't mean that it's not needed. It's all relative. So let's keep that in mind, is that a low rank doesn't necessarily mean it's not a project needed. Everything that's kind of on these lists for one reason or another was outlined as a need. So today, what we're looking for is one, really to validate the rankings. Do you kind of confirm with where these projects shook out, or do we need to dive a little bit deeper and sharpen our pencil to make sure that our rankings are aligned with the Commission's priorities? Next would be to direct staff trade-offs. So tell us, what projects you want to defer, what projects we absolutely need to keep, and kind of give that insight there, which will help us as we're matching our planned expenses up to revenues and then ultimately developing a proposed budget. And with that, as I mentioned, confirming must-fund items that are absolutely necessary, either based on safety or regulatory mandate. So we kind of categorize these into three different buckets. High-ranked projects, which is 60 above, and then we went into a moderate-ranked project, and then a lower-ranked project. So these that are in this first category, there's about 25 of them, and these are the ones that in that 100-point scoring would have resulted in 60 or above. This list here, this just shows some various different information for the project. So on the far left-hand side is the ranking. Oh, sorry. Far left-hand side is the rankings, and then your project names, where the funds come from for these projects, whether that's a capital general fund or if that's associated with our enterprise funds, such as stormwater, wastewater reclaim. What the various rank was for those projects. And then the fiscal year 26 revised budget column, that shows what the current budget is for that project. The fiscal year 26 estimated end of year actuals. Currently, that's what we're estimating that we're going to spend out of this budget, being that, we're just a few months towards the end of this fiscal year. Where we're at currently, this is what we're projecting. The fiscal year 26 through 27 reappropriation column, That represents the amount of current budgeted fiscal year 26 funds that we would recommend to reappropriate into the next fiscal year. And typically that is done to continue a project that's already active. And then further to the right there is fiscal year 27 new appropriation. So that's actually the new funding requests. So if it's not, something that's already in our budget that we're just asking to reappropriate, if this is new money, that's where that falls into that column. And then where you see highlighted green, that's a summation of the previous two columns where you're looking at what's being reappropriated from the prior budget and what is being asked new for fiscal year 27. And then going further to the right here, that 7-year column, that's just an outlook of what the project in total would cost over a 7-year period. At the time, we adopt budget on an annual basis year by year, but our capital improvement plan is typically a 5-year program. But in this budget analysis, we're taking that out an additional 2 years to see what those costs would be. And then the last 4 columns there, if the project is associated with either a grant or a state or federal appropriation that we have either been awarded or applied for, we noted what that was in there, gave a description of the grant, the funding, and then the type. In addition to this presentation, you should each have a handout that includes a few additional columns in there. That would note if the project is either one-time or reoccurring. So an example there would be, our wastewater pump station 1. It's a multi-year project, but that's a 1-year project until we upgrade that asset service life, and we won't have to think about that, for several years. Whereas you have a wastewater system cleaning and inspection project, that's something that's going to be reoccurring year after year. So we wanted to note, just so you have an idea of if that's a one-time or a reoccurring. We added a column of what an estimate operation and maintenance cost would be, just to give you an idea that, just because we spent the capital and we got the asset put in place, there's ongoing costs associated with that. So these numbers aren't exact, but it gives you a good order of magnitude of what to expect of whether that asset has some ongoing maintenance long-term or not. We noted whether this was a new asset or an existing asset. So that lets you know, is this, an end of useful life type of replacement for something we already have, or is this a new type of asset that we don't currently have that we're looking to add? What the estimated service life would be for that asset. So we can kind of think, pump station 1, we would hope that facility as a whole, would be in place for around 40 years. So that's just an example there. And then the total project cost of this is some of the longer range projects, for instance, our wastewater collection system. That's going to be our long-term I&I project. We have a 5-year plan. We show you the 7-year outlook, but we're projecting that program right now out through year 2042. So what does that value look like in the long term? Some other projects where that total project cost is relevant and needs to be considered is our shoreline protection improvements project. That's rehabilitating all of the city-owned seawalls and shorelines throughout the city. Currently, you'll see, we're asking, let's see, for next fiscal year of just over $1 million, and then you can see in the 5-year plan,
What line
we're
is
asking
that
for
you're
some
talking about? Which
shoreline protection improvements.
13.
But in total of that, 5-year period, it doesn't show what the full plan of that project would be. So currently, we have a seawall master plan that carries out to year 2038. In that program, there's a total about $8.5 million worth of improvements. So really the idea of showing that total project cost is giving you an idea of where some of the projects that we have longer range plans for, what those values are looking at. And then importantly, our resiliency adaptation projects, as we get into those are ones on your handout that show the total project cost of what those would actually be carried out from those planning studies. So it is a bigger value when you look at the total cost versus just the 5-year. But I'll get back into the presentation now. Now that we kind of defined what these different columns represent. So you'll see on this page, this is the top 10 projects that we sorted through and ranked. Mostly tied to either wastewater, stormwater, or critical facilities. And with each of these slides, I'll kind of go through, cover some highlights, and then I'll pause in case you guys have any comments. But then again, at the end, we'll open it up for any questions or comments. But before I move on, is anything on this slide?
I would say right off the bat that one thing that is confusing to me is when we say resiliency, I'm not sure if that includes stormwater. And it seems like it does sometimes, but then on the other hand, then we have under the fund stormwater projects. So to me, it would almost make more sense to break resiliency out so that if we know whether we're talking about stormwater or wastewater or exactly which type of resiliency we're talking about.
Okay, that's good feedback. As it's structured right now, what's shown in stormwater is trying to be existing assets. So for instance, like your stormwater system improvements project, that's rehabbing the existing stormwater infrastructure that we do have. So pipes, inlets, tops, those kind of things, replacing that. Whereas in your resiliency type project, you'll see like the Don Cesar resiliency adaptation. That is more the longer range plan where we're doing, pump stations and things like that. So that's kind of the separation there, but we're open to structure that as you guys direct.
Yeah, so okay, thanks for clarifying that. That is helpful to understand that stormwater classified as things that we already have that you're rehabbing, and resiliency implies new things that we're adding.
An increased level of service, basically.
Increased level of service. So it's still true, though, that I think that we'd like to understand how the resiliency projects break out. Like, is it a seawall? Is it a stormwater thing? Is it related to wastewater?
Understood. Yeah, and we can break that out kind of project by project. We can try to clarify that too in the description. For some of those, for instance, like that, we can stay on the Don Cesar resiliency adaptation. That includes a little bit of everything. Right now in that number, they're looking at shorelines, they're looking at roadways, they're looking at stormwater infrastructure. So it's kind of a multi-faceted project.
Yeah, and the resiliency projects are like $98 million, so they completely dwarf any of this other stuff.
They do, yes, yep. And those, as I mentioned before, those are projects taken from prior studies that were done. Right now, the city is underway with a watershed management master plan. That's a document that's required in our comp plan. Really something that should be updated every 10 years, and that's really your stormwater CIP. Of what you have. That plan isn't in place currently. We're developing that. So right now we're going off of the prior studies that are in place as we're developing and gathering new information.
Yeah, and so from the feedback I've gotten, I would almost say that your classification of resiliency is almost, in a lot of cases, the new things that people want from a drainage standpoint. Or maybe it's things they have now that are inadequate. So it seems like there might be an overlap there. But the point is that if we were to talk about stormwater, which is one of the biggest complaints that I've had, what part of that $98 million is stormwater?
Okay.
Because if you need something different than what you have now to solve the problem, then that's super, super important according to the feedback I've had.
Okay.
I realize there's others. I ultimately I've asked, I'd love to have the spreadsheet that I can just do your own filtering, right? Stormwater plus new equals resiliency and stormwater, theoretically, right? Something like that. Theoretically, I'm just.
Yeah, I just want to understand what we're talking about when we say resiliency, especially since it dwarfs everything else.
Yeah.
It's a $98 million. So.
Can you go back
Well done.
to that one slide, please? In terms of prioritization, though, I would just submit to you that Fire Station 22, even though it's not my district, would be brought down to just above the facility, elevators, and where the other capital funded projects are. And that's just simply because we're well funded when it comes to the grants. We have $6.5 million that have already been given to us. We just put in for the 1.5. So in terms of prioritization and trying to get these other things across the goal line, I would just lessen the value. Still keep it in the top 10. I do think that it's critical that we get our firefighters back into a full-time firehouse as soon as possible, but we're underway. Looks like we'll be getting that done here within the next 2 fiscal years. So, thank you.
Commissioner Marriott, please.
Thanks, Camden. I just had a quick question to make sure I'm interpreting some of these things right. On our sheet, or I guess it's up there also on the grant funding column, the grant amount, and I see where there's a status for the grant. I just want to make sure that the grant, are there any numbers in any of the grant amount columns that are money that we've already spent? Or is the grant money in all of these columns money that we're either have and haven't spent, or are expecting to get, or have applied for and are hoping to get?
I can clarify as we go through these, but I believe the only one that we've actually spent is this pump station 1 that's listed as current. The only reason we're still carrying that on there is because there's return on investment tracking that we'll be doing for the next 10 years associated with that grant.
Okay.
So keeping it on our radar, but that $2 million has already been
spent, received and spent probably. Okay, but the rest of them, and certainly anything that's submitted, and current means we've been approved and we are getting the money, or?
Current, I believe, means we received the money. Is that correct?
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
So approved, there should be some in there that is approved where we've been awarded the grant, but we haven't received the money yet.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I kind of had that same question because I was trying to follow that a little bit. And then I see under facility building repairs and facility roof replacements, and none of those are FEMA?
Not that's been obligated currently. So we're pursuing FEMA projects on that, but we don't have guaranteed, approved funding quite yet.
Okay, but they've been.
We haven't. So this really what's listed is like discretionary type grants or competitive grants or appropriations. We don't have all 80 FEMA projects reflected in these grant columns.
Okay.
We do have a follow-up slide where we can go into some more details on the FEMA.
Okay, because I would have thought that some of the repairs and the.
We did. We are
Replacements
pursuing
and
insurance and FEMA for a lot of these type
And
projects.
the elevators too.
Correct.
We had some on that. Okay.
Yeah, we can. Maybe that'd be better if we added a column, whether if it's FEMA project eligible or not, so we can see what that is.
Or insurance, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think ultimately, I don't want to speak,
FEMA,
I
yeah,
apologize,
FEMA-
but
FEMA
we're
oriented.
getting money in from either grants, FEMA, insurance, and that helps us to kind of prioritize these because maybe they're time boxed. you know,
Or reimbursable.
Well, that
or reimbursable, all those
yeah,
things, right?
the amounts are not as high as we're looking at here, so.
Right, agreed.
Then I have another question.
Yes.
On item 21.
Before, just a process, Commissioner. He was gonna try to go slide by slide and pause. Are you okay if he doesn't, if we wait till we
Go back.
get, okay,
Go
so
back.
are we done with the first slide?
Well, I just have a few more questions about the entire process, if you don't mind, right?
Okay.
So, and I think we get those questions about what do these columns mean? What do they?
Yes, yes, yes.
Right, and then we can go through slide by slide. Am I correct that grants typically have a time frame where you're going to use it or lose it kind of thing? I know we just ran into the same thing on the undergrounding. So feels to me like the things with grants, assuming they cover a large portion, might be a high priority for us to begin investing so that we don't run into a time frame issue like we theoretically did with other recent projects that we've had to put a pause on, right? And then I agree with Commissioner Robinson. I'd love to see, basically for me, it's anything where we've got funding coming in that we think would offset the total cost in some way, shape, or form, whether it be grants, insurance, FEMA, something. Because those aren't quite as daunting for us to think about spending, $6.8 million, for example, on wastewater system cleaning and inspection, which is, Fire Station 22 to Commissioner Maldonado's, when you find out that 6.5 is already a grant. Right now we're talking $300,000 worth of stuff. So I think in general that's helpful, and I appreciate that you've got these in here. And so in my head, I'm kind of looking at which ones have offsetting monies coming in through any means. What is the true cost for this decision? So if, again, in the case of Fire Station 22, it sounds like the true cost to us is is about $300,000 worth of additional money we need to spend. So that's far less daunting than the 6.8, right?
3,000.
I'm sorry, 300,000, I'm sorry, 300,000.
3,000.
6861 minus
I'm sorry.
6500. So
300.
386. All right, I'm looking at the, I'm sorry, very specifically item 3.
Okay.
Item 3, Fire Station 22 replacement.
3 mil.
We're
3
asking.
mil.
Yeah,
Or
okay,
No,
gotcha. You're talking, you're doing
300.
7-year total,
300,
right?
yeah.
7-year total.
I'm
Yeah.
doing 7-year.
We're going to get ourselves into a $3 million total over the next 7 years, and spend 6,800 this year theoretically. Okay, or 6.8 million.
So maybe you were talking about a net cost
Yeah.
Yeah,
column?
it's really, yeah, something is a, and I'm sorry,
And that's because we'd anticipate that we wouldn't complete that fire station all in 27. That would extend into 28.
okay.
So net cost over the entire 7-year period might be helpful.
Yeah, and I think
Concept.
your
That's
total
easier to
project
look
cost
at.
may be getting to some of that, because it's beyond 7 years, and some of these you get,
A majority, yeah, that 7-year cost and the total cost will be the same for a majority of projects.
right? But for example, on row 2, wastewater collection system improvements, total project cost is 10.6.
Correct,
But
yeah.
that's recurring, right? It's
That's 'cause it's
recurring, so
recurring.
annually recurring at, I presume, 1.5 million annually?
Yes, our right now, the asset management plan we have is 1.5 annually for a series of years, and then you taper that down as you get closer to the 2042 planning horizon.
And why do we taper it down?
Just so you do a bulk of the work up front, but you're always going to, be maintaining your system.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to, when I assume recurring, I assume it's an annual recurring kind of cost to maintain the existing systems that we own. And you're
Yes, but
suggesting that,
once a bulk of the issues are addressed and we're in a good standing, then our investment year after year would be lower to maintain. Right now, we have a wholesale replacement that needs to
it
get
almost
done.
feels like there's a third category. Then there's the get it up snuff, and then there's the ongoing maintenance of once it's kind of steady state in a good,
Yeah, get higher up front to get to steady state, I guess would be the.
right, okay, all right, thank you. So, City Manager, I think you're just asking us to look at items 1 through 10 right now, right? Okay. And just to be clear, item 9, we are not it's not proposed to be budgeted for this year. I see a 0 in there or a dash, right? So no investment in facility elevator rehabilitation. in
Correct,
27.
yeah, right now, we are tracking to complete that project within this fiscal year.
Okay. Okay, and then similarly on item 10, facility building repairs, you're saying we will have materially completed 1.5 million, and what will remain will be $50,000 next year.
Correct.
And is that, and that looks like that completes the entire project, essentially.
Completes the entire project for a little bit less than what we had initially budgeted.
Understood?
In Camden, were these hurricane facility repairs specifically?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Okay. And to Commissioner Robinson's question, do you know, like, can you just anecdotally say that, for example, facility elevator repairs should be covered under insurance or FEMA or something else? Is there something, I know what we have in front of us is just grants. Can you- if you
Both
can-
of those should be covered by insurance. So our strategy is getting as much money from insurance and then going to FEMA for the rest of it. So we do have active FEMA projects, but our main goal would be to recover through insurance.
Okay.
So the way this would flow from a budget perspective is 99% of grants and insurance is reimbursable. So we have to have the cash flow to pay up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then it could take months, years, FEMA's up to 7 years. So 3 years from now, you might see a revenue offset come
Understood.
in because we finally get reimbursed by FEMA. that our plan is to feed it back into the capital program. So you'll start to see those revenue offsets as insurance and FEMA starts to flow back in.
Understood. And
So for
so,
now, we have to have the cash to pay for it.
understood, completely. And so the storms that hit us in 2024, roughly 2 years ago, a little less than, do we have any FEMA or insurance money flowing in that, would it be indicated here that we've got money coming in from prior investments, if you will, or prior resolutions?
You're going to see a very detailed FEMA slide after Camden's presentation because we are managing 86 project grants out of FEMA right now. And the insurance, Devin will start to show you as she brings the budget forward with known revenue sources coming in 27. And we definitely will take your feedback and add to the spreadsheet of what we can expect. So those estimates that we are expecting on each project for revenue back. We've received some, I'll call it de minimis amount of insurance compared to what they owe us. So, but that'll definitely be shown in your budget in 27.
Okay. And then one more last question. I apologize for taking over this conversation. Camden, just between rows 21 and 22, you've got highest ranked totals. I assume that's the, per se, the greens that we had asked about at one point? That is the total of the greens, right? Okay, you got it. It's
That's
on your
correct.
slide. In my spreadsheet, it's not quite as obvious, but effectively, if we did all of the greens in 2027, you're asking for $23.3 million to do all of the greens, unless your numbers, yes, you have the same number.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks, sir. Oh, good, thank you. City manager asking us for, say, items 1 through 10. Are you do
Yeah.
any concerns? Anything we
Thumbs
need to
up,
pull?
thumbs down, and we'll move to the next page of the spreadsheet.
I don't have a concern with 1 through 10 personally, unless somebody else does.
Okay.
All right, and here we're looking at projects 10 through 17 that still fall in that ranking of 60 or above. These first 3 projects, those are similar to what we discussed. We're tracking to complete those within the fiscal year, but we wanted to show those, being aware of the fiscal year 26 expenses.
And clarify for me again, the shoreline protection improvements, those are largely city-owned seawalls, is that?
It's all citywide seawalls. So we had a citywide master plan done in 2021. So it's just working from the recommendations out of that plan.
Okay, thank you.
And that compared to the 36th Avenue seawall? Is that,
So the 36th Avenue seawall was its own project because it included some additional stormwater improvements away from the seawall. So that project scope is more inclusive than just the seawall. So that seawall is identified as a need in the master plan, but it was taken out since it has a larger scope to it.
okay, so that's the seawall and stormwater improvements. And again, city-owned.
Yes, city-owned.
Okay.
And you'll see a similar type of approach with some of the roadways too. So we have our roadway rehabilitation program, which is milling and resurfacing and maintaining our roads. But some of the bigger projects that may have additional scope to them, like Gulf Winds or Boca Ciega or Gulfway, those would get paired out as their own project.
So along those same line there, clarification on the seawalls, shoreline protection improvements for the city, is that just repairs or is that raising to a higher standard? And if so, which standard?
It's a combination, so it really depends on the condition of the seawall. So part of that master plan is they did an inspection and a condition rating on each of them. So if it was minor and the seawall was still in good shape, it would have been just, maybe a small repair, some additional concrete type work. Some locations do recommend full sail replacement, and in those locations, we are recommended to bring it up to the current code of 5 foot and a VD 88.
Thank you.
Ms. Robbins, do you have questions?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That on.
A few questions from me, please. I seem to all coalescing around the same kind of stuff, but the shoreline protection improvements, row 13, I see an investment this year of 1.06, I think I'm saying, million, but I run all the way out to your total cost of 8.515, right? So we start this, we need to be moving forward. This is not something we stop, right? You don't want to go back and I'm suggesting that we wouldn't spend $1 million in this year and then abandon it some other year. So this also speaks to Commissioner Causey's question. This is existing and recurring. So I will ask, $1 million this year, 1.06 million this year, but over 7 years, 3.602. So I assume we're getting into the same conversation we had a little while ago, which is first few years might be a little more expensive, but after that it's going to taper off.
Correct, yes. So as I mentioned, the seawall master plan, was 2021 through, I think, year 2038. But there was a series of projects recommended, in year 2022, 23, 24, 25 that may not have gotten prioritized or completed. So in a lot of our earlier years in this program, we're accomplishing those projects that were recommended in prior years that weren't yet completed.
And I'm seeing it, I'm just making sure it's stated out loud, right? The grant on this is $625,000 out of what we're projecting a total of $8.5 million. Is that right? So this is largely on us if we choose to do this.
Or, or pursue other, grant opportunities. But
So is that just the grant for 2027? Or would we be able to get more grants over?
we could potentially get more grants. We could potentially apply for more grants. That 625 is related specifically to locations in the Don Cesar neighborhood.
Okay, city property in the Don Cesar neighborhood.
I'm sorry, I don't see a 6.5. I'm just curious what.
625,000 grant amount.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Do we have fundage left over from the Don Cesar outfall projects improvement phase with the 625?
Not currently, no. We haven't
Used
started
it all?
construction on that
Okay.
project yet, so but I don't anticipate.
Because I see that as a grant of 625,000 as well.
That grant should be shown in line for the Don Cesar Outfall Improvements Phase 2 project. It shouldn't be shown under the Shoreline Protection Improvements project.
Nothing for shoreline improvements. And coincidentally, they're both numbered 13 on all of these. So, but
It's the rank.
oh, gotcha. I'm sorry.
Because they're tied, yeah.
Okay, so there's no grant amount then, again, for the shoreline protection improvement.
No, that would do.
Okay, so that's just a typo there. Okay.
Okay.
So back to the Don Cesar outfall. It says that 7-year total was, okay, well, that's just that for the fiscal. Because I see the 625 on that one.
So that grant, that $625,000 grant was for 3 additional outfall locations in the Don Cesar to essentially do what we did at the other 5, where we built the city seawall up to 5 foot, where we have those ski ramps.
Okay.
As we got into the design of that project and the Don Cesar resiliency adaptation, started to advance, we didn't want to, or staff's recommendation would be, not to move forward with a project that we necessarily didn't feel much success in. And we didn't want to construct a project that may conflict with future improvements. So right now, that $625,000 is dedicated to raise those 3 additional seawalls. My recommendation would be to halt that work. And coincide with this Don Cesar resiliency adaptation project. So that way we're not putting, millions of dollars into something that may be proposed to get scrapped, right down the road.
Are we able to use that 625 on the Don Cesar resiliency project?
So right now we're coordinating with DEP to reallocate that 625 to the tide check valve project that just recently got approved. So similar location, similar type cost. But just reapply that 625 there, which would alleviate the stormwater funds that are currently funding that project. FDEP has been open to that suggestion, especially since that tide check valve project is shovel-ready and already issued for construction. So that would be a grant agreement I would anticipate bringing to commission in the next coming months for your review and approval.
Okay, so that's what I see here at tidal valves and the seawall. Over here. Okay, thank you.
Item 16, I'm just a little confused. On my sheet, it says Paso Grove seawall replacement, and then out to the right, it says new. And I assume that's an existing asset that we're,
That should be existing.
okay. All right.
And on that same line, why is there not a total project cost again?
Because it's realized within that 7-year period. We were only really labeled total project cost if it would, differ from that 7-year outlook.
You know, that, okay, now I'm looking at your slide, so, because our sheet's got a little, the particular cell is there, but we got 6 million of grants against a total 7-year payment of 8 million. Is that, am I reading that right?
That's correct. That grant is not awarded yet, though. It's still under review.
Okay. Is there a level of confidence when a number shows up on here that it's not awarded? Is it likely? Is it, we feel?
I don't have much.
We don't like to put confidence levels on state and federal
Understood.
until it's awarded.
Okay. So just the fact that it's here says it's submitted, that's at least that,
Yes.
right? No idea of whether we'll get that money reimbursed to another, okay. Unless it says current, which I think I'm hearing is that.
We've
is-
secured.
We've secured the money. Okay.
So if we were to go forward with the number 16 line row, and we don't get a grant for it, then what happens? Do we reallocate that 3.6 million? Is that how it works, or?
Not necessarily. So Camden would need to weigh on, but I believe this could cause a failure of a road. So that's why it's ranked where it's at, but I'm not sure if this is the correct project. So no, we would say we're gonna move forward and
We just won't have the reimbursement part.
correct. And that's why everything in that green column, just think cash out you've written a check.
Yeah, it's good to know that maybe some of it's coming back, that's why I'm trying to.
Correct.
Okay.
But unless we get awarded, you wrote a check for 3.6 million.
That's
and
sort of
it
like a
left your bank account.
proposed net cost.
Well, right now, your net cost is 8 million because I don't have anything.
Right.
All right, and we'll spend 3.6 this year.
Correct.
Now, I do have to make a candidate's question for you about seawalls in general, right? If the city somehow goes through and raises all of our seawalls and yet residents don't, my understanding, unless you tell me otherwise, we've just created a funnel. You know, if we're higher than each of those residents around us, then we've created a funnel through that resident's home, right? And so it scares me that if it's not comprehensive for a seawall, that we've created gaps in the seawall, or we've elevated above those gaps in the seawall, and we've created, again, what I'll call a funnel of water. It's going to go 5 feet, 5 feet, 4 feet. Engineering-wise, it's going to tell me it's going to go through the 4 feet section, right?
Yes. Yeah, water's going to find its lowest point.
Right. And so I have to tell you, I'm a little concerned with doing pieces of seawall because you really don't solve the water problem if it's not comprehensive. That's my engineering background, but you're the guy. So tell me, am I incorrect in what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's definitely an approach. I mean, it's kind of a chicken or the egg. What comes first? But you're absolutely right. If the city did all of its shorelines and the rest of the private, which is a majority of the island shorelines, aren't at that same elevation, then it's kind of all for none.
I mean, I get repairs to the seawalls, but I'm not sure, how much extra does it cost to go from where we are now to the 5 foot?
In some cases, it's relatively cheap. You know, if the bulkhead itself is in good set, and you're just adding to the cap, if the structural capability, you're just pouring a cap, that's relatively inexpensive. We did a project similar to that at 29th Avenue last year, and I think that was in the realm of a 40,000, 30,000 maybe for that stretch. But if you're doing full depth sheet pile replacement, then it gets a lot more expensive. So it's really kind of a case by case.
Twice as expensive?
Yeah, it could be at least twice as expensive. But that's really a policy decision. Right now, we're operating based on the adopted code, because if you put so much investment into a seawall to repair it, then you have to bring it up to the code elevation. So that's how we're operating right now. I think this is an item for discussion at June 23rd, maybe?
I mean, I will tell you, I think this has ramifications, not only for the city and its budget, but obviously every resident that's around these seawalls. And I personally, I'm worried about it, to be frank with you. And I would want to gather a community consensus, possibly through a survey, if that's where we want to go, right, that says we agree that this is the right approach for the city to take. I'm worried about, and I don't know if city attorney, if you can tell me there's liability of us, in the sense that we've now caused a funnel point, as I call it, and did we impose a liability? We were building to code. Everything Director Mills is saying is accurate, right? We're building what the codes tell us to. They just happen to be higher than what those around us. Did we create a liability for ourselves in that sense? If we try to avoid that and build at the same level as what our neighbors are, then, did we really solve the problem long term, or are we just kind of kicking the can down the road? Seawalls to me feel like something that is, I'm sorry, I didn't let you answer, but to me it feels like you do it all comprehensively, or you.
Yeah, before I want to admit any liability on the city's part, I want to talk to the building official and things, but typically we're have sovereign immunity for most of our projects and most of our planning decisions. But still, you don't want to flood your neighbors, obviously, and there's case law that you're not supposed to wall off water and push it into your neighbor's home. But I don't think that we're doing that, at least directly, but I understand your concern, and that we talked about, I think, the last meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before where they were here talking about the different levels. Yeah. It's about the rainfall rather than storm surge. Seawalls are there for the high tide, king tides, but then a higher seawall keeps more rainwater behind the seawall, which has to be retained in a stormwater retention pond engineered to hold that water, additional water, if it's flowing through holes in the existing seawall out to the bay, and now it's kept on the land, has to go somewhere. So it has to be engineered.
I'll pause, and I know there's other questions around me. I apologize. Is there an alternative that says we repair, to Commissioner Causey's questions, not full replace, not try and get back to code? Just I don't want a street falling into the sea at some point, right? So I'm thinking about repairs on these things that don't raise the elevation of the wall, so we're not having these conversations about what we're doing. Can you bifurcate this into what it would cost us to just kind of get our seawalls up to snuff to where they currently are, without going to the next level of we're going to raise them and we're going to invest in a long-term effort there?
Sure, to see what that total cost would look like if we kind of reduce that scope some.
Yeah, I think for me, if they're 4-foot walls now and we replace and repair at 4 foot, and then you tell me to add another foot, in a year or two is a significantly less cost than the original, then it may be a phased approach for me. But
okay.
I'm asking, not telling. And now I've realized a bunch
The
of green lights.
only thing is the city has to follow their own ordinances, so you would have to change the seawall ordinance for him to do that. He has to follow the city municipal code.
Okay.
We can cost, I think maybe you can cost it, but he can't design unless this commission alters the code.
Okay. Even on a repair versus a full replacement?
Well, repair is different. If you're repairing,
I think if you're doing, I'll have to look at the code, but I think if it's up to a certain amount of repair, then it's, a
It
substantial
triggers
improvement
it.
type of thing.
Gotcha. Kind of like a home. Right?
Yeah.
Same things we've talked about. Okay. I know Commissioner Mayor has been on for a long time, so please first.
Sure. Thanks, Camden. So I'm not trying to be dense, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but but could you, because I've heard a couple different things up here about seawalls and seawall heights, and I completely agree that if all of the seawalls in the city are not raised to the same height, then any storm surge above or sea level rise above the lowest seawall in the city is going to cause flooding. What I'm not certain I'm on board with, and I would like the opinion of an engineer, is that I don't think that if my seawall is 5 feet and my neighbor's is 4 feet, and the water gets above the 4-foot seawall, I don't think that my seawall being 5 feet tall means that they get an extra foot of water next door. Like water finds its own level, right? Once it comes over the seawall, it's also going to flood my house if I have a 5-foot seawall. So I don't understand the idea that we would be making any flooding problems worse by raising city seawalls, unless I'm missing something.
No, your description is accurate, and it's really kind of a case-by-case basis, but yeah, water's always going to seek its lowest level. And really the situation, and I can think like maybe in the Donces neighborhood, where that's more of a closed basin, almost where you got the bayway on one side and it's completely surrounded by the seawall. You know, I could envision a scenario where if you had a very heavy rain event and your seawall was at elevation 5, but those homes' finished floors were lower, if that rainwater right now is supposed to go to the street ends and evacuate, if it wasn't able to do that and the water staged up, you know, you get to that finished floor elevation before you're going to overtop that higher seawall. That could be a type of scenario where you could have an issue, but then again, that's a lot of what ifs and hypotheticals. You know, stormwater wise, what amount of water would actually have to come down from the sky to have that type of situation?
Right.
That I don't have an idea on without running a model.
And so, yeah, so I mean, I think that historically that's been the reasoning for requiring seawalls to get raised at some point, even in a piecemeal way, is that every seawall in the city isn't going to reach the end of its useful life at the same time. And so if we say, well, we're not raising any seawalls until everybody raises their seawall, that means we're never raising the seawalls. And if we never want to raise the seawalls, that's fine, which, you know, kind of lends itself to the bigger conversation, which is, you know, we need to protect city assets because that's our job, right? The seawalls needing to be in good shape to keep roads from falling into the bay is very important. At some point, I don't know that we can protect every single house in the city just by raising seawalls for houses that are slab on grade at 3 to 5 feet in AVD. Like, there's nothing we can do to make those houses never flood again. And so if people aren't going to pick their houses up off the ground in some fashion, there is no amount of money we are ever going to spend that is going to keep those houses from flooding, nor is there anything we can do that's going to make them flood worse, right? Like, if the water gets above 5 feet, everything that's on the ground is going to flood. And if it doesn't, it's not. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that we're not going to make the flooding worse at somebody else's house if we make our seawalls higher. We're just trying to look long-term at the vision for the city. But, you know, to your point, that's expensive. We can also say that we think that the city, I mean, we live on a sandbar and it's going to go underwater occasionally. You know, so that's the other way of looking at it.
Understood. Commissioner Causey.
Well, I think it's important to clarify that the seawall primarily, I would say, is for retaining soil. So if you don't have a seawall, your yard or your street will eventually erode away as you have waves over time. So you put in the seawall up to the level that you need to retain soil. And then if you do have a huge rain or Helene comes in, it goes higher. I mean, the next storm might be 20 feet. Mm-hmm. And it's going to go over a 5-foot seawall. And the funneling thing is when you've got a series of 5-footers and then you've got a 3-footer, well, all the water is going to run out the 3-foot area. And it might cause more erosion. So that's what I think people are talking about relative to funneling. But I think the bigger concept here is that if there's one single spot in the city that's still 3 feet or 4 feet, and every other part is 5 feet, everything's going to flood exactly to the same level. So I would rather fix storm drains and fix other problems before I spend money on seawalls being higher until we can raise all the seawalls are raised. I understand the overtime thing, but it's a very, very long time before that's ever really going to practically happen. Like, for example, you would probably need to raise the houses, and once they were raised, then you could raise the yards and the streets, and now you would be at a higher level, and you could raise the seawalls. That's the progressive, logical progression of this problem. But the main problem is if you don't raise them all, there's no purpose in going to 5. And then, so you really have to ask, how long is it until we need 5 feet? If it's 30 years from now that we're planning for, and that's almost the service life of seawall. We can put new seawalls in the Don Cesar neighborhood, for example, in probably a year's time if we got busy. Or 2, we could raise them all. Or the seawalls in the city, I don't know the length of those compared to that neighborhood, but if you just think if we were...
I don't know how we compel private property owners.
Oh, I'm not saying we could do it. I'm saying time. If it had to be done, it could be done within a year or 2. And I guess the point is, it doesn't make sense to spend money 30 years before when we really need it. And second point relative to the seawalls is they're not even effective at all until all of them are raised. So as far as protecting the city assets, they're not protected if there's any private property whatsoever that's not raised.
Camden, the Pass-a-Grille seawall replacement, that's a replacement because that seawall has failed essentially, right?
Correct, yes, that seawall's in back.
So regardless of height, that one needs to be replaced. And we
And
could,
that one does.
the height could be to be determined, but that seawall needs to be replaced regardless, right?
That seawall needs to be replaced regardless, should be a priority. And the elevation of the existing seawall is mostly already at that 5-foot NAVD 88. So we likely wouldn't be
Wouldn't be
raising
changing
it.
anything.
And we're trying to continue the same height that's already in existence,
Yep.
where it remains, so.
Okay.
And there's a potential. We've got a request of 8 million theoretically coming in, so. Given what I'm hearing, I'm okay with that. Moving forward.
Just got one more comment on the seawalls, and then we'll get off the horse. The average life expectancy is much less than what we're showing here. We're showing that we anticipate these will last 50 years. I think that's being on the high end. I would say that, if we're going to accurately forecast this, that we need to bring it down to a more likely expectancy.
Okay.
And then the older ones, to back to the discussions from my fellow commissioners on the privately owned ones, those are probably 15 to 25 years, just depending on when they were built, not today's modern standards. So that's going to impact the entire discussion that we've been having about, weaknesses and fortification and stuff. But I would say make that a more measurable, more accurate life expectancy. Thank you.
I just want to say that we're talking king tides here, keeping king tides out, because right now we're looking at areas that do get hit with the king tides,
Yeah.
and it's coming over. So there is a need to raise them, but, and again, to Commissioner Marriott's point, it's got to slowly happen. It's not going to happen dramatically. It's not going to happen fast. And if one person's up to hold back a king tide or help prevent the erosion from a king tide, the other people have to do their share too and do their due diligence and either let their property become washed out or replace their seawall. But, that's the risk we take living out here and living on the water.
One key consideration as well is from a priority perspective, we've heard from residents who have asked the city to do something about enforcement of our seawall ordinance. And I have specifically directed staff to hold back on residential enforcement until the city actually follows their own rules. And so if we're not committed to investing in this city infrastructure, then I don't feel comfortable telling residents to do something we're not willing to do. So the policy decision behind this is very important because it sets the course of how we will actually enforce on residential spaces that are impeding on other people's property now and eroding their neighbors' property, and we have not made an assertion as a city yet, because we've been waiting for the city to make this a priority as well before we take that position.
And can you, well, go ahead.
Sorry. I think where I'm personally at, 105, is that given that this is more of an emergency kind of situation and more dire need right now, and it's already at 5, and we're just, putting it right back where it is, I'm actually not as concerned about 16, particularly with the hopes that we get our 8 million back, right? And so this needs to be done either way. It feels like a high priority item. I do have a question, just circling back, I'm sorry, to 13, because it's got another $8.5 million cost. And I just need to understand what exactly we're getting for that $8.5 million, and in particular, 106. I mean, 'cause it just says FDEP Resilient Florida, but I don't know really what that means. What is that shoreline protection improvement piece actually physically doing?
That is either repairing, it's basically bringing the condition rating of the seawalls up to a satisfactory or above rating on average across the entire 88,000 some odd linear foot of seawall that the city has.
Excluding theoretically the Paso Grill, which is its own separate cost to do with that?
Yeah, any like 36th Avenue, Paso Grill, those that got identified as their own separate CIP, those were removed from the master plan valuation. So that 8.5 number, or 8 million number would reflect, not having that Paso Grill seawall, not having that 36th Avenue, but
Everything else theoretically is now up to snuff, is what you're saying.
bringing the whole city's shoreline up to satisfactory or above.
So through 16, just to be clear, through 17, just because that's all that's in front of us, there are no more seawalls that, unless some other pages beyond it, but there's no other seawalls that you're alluding to. That would get all of the city's seawalls up to code and up to standards and with a presumable lifespan on paper of 50, but to Commissioner Maldonado's point, whatever it turns out to be.
Correct.
Right, but that's it. Our city's now done our parts on seawalls, and therefore we can, all right.
These are what was identified in the seawall project, though, correct? We
Correct, yeah.
have them mapped out, condition-wise, we know where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So that was done previously to any of our, except for maybe their appointments.
That is correct. Another seawall is community center. That was one identified in the master plan, but that one's paired out as its own separate CIP project.
Yes, presumably lower, because I haven't seen it yet. Where is it? We haven't,
37.
yeah, okay. Another 3.6 with some grant money to it. Okay.
Just one last question then I can think of is there any circumstance when you wouldn't recommend, like I know we had just been thinking about policy on people who want a variance on their seawall height. How, is there any time you would recommend that a variance be allowed?
I guess if it was, causing some adverse impacts, that would be something that would have to be looked at. But outside of that, if it really is, it's the policy decision. If you want all the seawalls to get to 5 foot over time, you have to get there somehow.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're ready to move on to the next.
So next is 18 through 21, and then this shows you the total for all of the green high-ranked projects.
Okay, there's my 21. So, for the subaqueous line, why is that not higher on the list, considering that is all of our waste going out, and that project's going to take longer, and I know we're coming to the end of life on that.
I'll have to look through the specifics on the ranking. Maybe timing may have been a weight to influence that.
Because to me, that trumps seawalls hands down.
Yeah, I completely agree.
We need to have basic sewage here.
Yeah, we can revisit that ranking and see, why did that one slot where it's at.
I'm concerned about that because if I remember correctly, end of life is 2027, which is next year.
It's, it was recommended to be replaced then, but the end of life right now is like 2038. But I mean, it's an estimate. It's not an exact science. You don't want to wait till that very end of that to move forward. So I agree this should be prioritized.
Well, the question is, why is it less of a priority right now? What in our process put it down lower? Because that speaks to our system.
We can look at that and get back to you.
Yep. Kevin, I have a question. I've already kind of, I think I stated in the last discussion, there's been some initial talks about potentially offloading our wastewater system. At least that's been my dialogue. If that comes to fruition, I certainly don't want to be investing in things that we don't get a return on our investment when we offload that system. And so I don't know if you can speak to, it's particularly, I assume this is a subaqueous line that's going to go to a very specific point at a very specific, I assume the city of St. Pete now tying into their current line where we currently go. Is that correct?
Right now, this cost figure is based on the recommendation to do a new subaqueous route over to South Pasadena.
Right. And that theoretically goes to the city of St. Pete, which is where our current line goes to, correct?
Right. Same pump station that our current line goes to.
And so theoretically, if we come to fruition that we're not going to St. Pete in the future and we're going to Pinellas County, then that line becomes obsolete as soon as we do that. Is that a fair statement?
Potentially, yeah, it could.
Okay. And I think you said you don't want to go up to 2038, but I think I heard you say 2038 is the current end of life on the current one. But you don't want to get there. I heard you.
Correct.
But you did say 2038, right?
Yeah, that's what's outlined in the preliminary engineering report for the force main design.
Okay. I would just go on record of saying I'd prefer not to invest in that one this year. If we want to talk about next year, I would like some, I'm just going on record personally. I would like to investigate whether that's something that we could hold off this year and potentially see where we get to with conversations about offloading that system. Because I don't want to invest even the $352,000 this year, which is against a 7-year of $21 million, because we've just jumped into a pool that's really deep when you tell me 7 years of $21 million worth of stuff. And so,
I'm just going to say this is the first time I've heard 2038 on the life expectancy on that, because that's the original from the city, built in 1950s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's
Trust
Trust
that's
was
76 years, guys. And this is the first I've heard of 2038. Who has put out 2038?
That was in the report prepared by Kemley Horn. They were the engineers that did the force main.
In the 2016 or 2017 surveys?
They did a report in 2018 of all of the force mains, and then just in 2025 they completed one specifically just for the
So
force main
the
one.
2025 now says 2038.
Yes, yeah. And,
Okay.
and I think the one
That's-
prior, the 2018, I think they gave a range of years that it could fall into. So it was still consistent with that prior recommendation,
Okay.
but I would caveat it is an estimate. So
yeah. Personally, this is the first one I've contemplated, given all that we've talked about, this is the first one I would like to scratch out of this year's budget personally.
And I'm just pointing out, we have service life of the new one at 75 years.
21.
And this last
Oh,
one
sorry,
is
21.
basically 75 years.
5 years.
Camden, what's the consequence of removing, it looks like you're asking for a new appropriation, which tells me that you probably have something in progress, so what is it gonna stop?
So right now, as it's planned in the CIP, this project would be constructed through years 2032. So if we were, to delay it, you would just think, that construction would end in 2033 then. Right now, our plan for next year would be to go through the procurement phase. With this type of project, obviously it's very complex. So the procurement, dealing with your different stakeholders, South Pasadena, the county, St. Petersburg, that would pretty much be all the effort that we go through next year, is developing the procurement package, putting it out, getting contractor engineering teams to bid it, evaluate it, take a contract, and then start planning out, material procurement timelines and everything. So a lot of the work that would be done next year would be procurement related.
But procurement on to a very specific
Path,
endpoint,
yeah.
right? That's what I'm alluding to.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting that the endpoint may change.
The endpoint may change, and our engineering recommendation for this project specifically, project delivery method would be a progressive design build type project where you bring in your contractor up front with your engineer, so that's who bids it. But with that progressive framework, you have off-ramps along the way before you get to your guaranteed maximum price. So you get to an early design phase, if you don't like where things are going or budget's an issue, you have an off-ramp there. So we do have, with that approach, we have some flexibility, I guess is what I'm saying.
So you wouldn't stop anything you're currently doing to defer the 200,000 plus the 151 that would not be reappropriated?
We do have an existing PO currently with an engineering vendor who's serving as the owner's rep for this project. And so the balance of what is proposed for next fiscal year is the remainder on that purchase order to keep seeing through their procurement phase. So we would be, if we didn't fund the rest of that purchase order, then we would be kind of stopping the project at that point.
So we would pause the project, tell our vendor, stop working on it, and when it picks back up, would you have to start over again?
I wouldn't have to start over. We
Okay.
can pick up where we left off.
Okay, that was going to be my question, is if we can pick up where we leave off. And also, I think, I had a brief conversation with somebody at the county about this as well, and my understanding was that if we speak to the county about selling them the sewer system or them taking it over, or whatever verbiage you want to use about how that works, that those conversations could take a little while. But I would also anticipate that, in 6 or 8 months, we'll have some kind of idea of if it's even a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know that leaving that $200,000 in the budget isn't a bad idea to leave it there, even if we do put a little bit of a pause on the project to see where these conversations go, so that we don't end up in a corner where we go, well, now we've locked ourselves into a spot where we don't have any options.
So budget, but don't spend until we figure out what we're doing. What you're
So
doing.
until we know what we're doing, yeah.
We're still going to likely have to get it up to a certain level before we hand it off or sell it. I think that was one of the...
Yeah, I think for me, if the pump, for example, way back at item 1, the pump itself is going to be used no matter what, right? No matter what, that pump is going to be there, right? Ken, please correct me if I say something wrong. It's the pipe that may go somewhere completely different that we would be obsoleting if we went somewhere different.
Yeah, and I like the off-ramps. So I agree.
I have a question. Other than getting this off of our books and putting it on Pinellas County's books to do this repair, the residents are still, and property owners here are still going to pay for it.
Oh, of course. I mean, we're
So what are we really doing other than shell game? I mean, we maintain control and maintain cost controls if we take over, keep the project. I'm just saying the project's not going away. It's going to be either done by the county and billed back to the residents, or it's going to be done by us and probably billed back to the residents too. One or the other. The only thing that we do is we maintain control ourselves and accountable to the residents here. Just saying.
I would argue at a lower economy of scale, we don't have the economies of scale that the county does, and I would argue that we'll be having the same conversation, not us, but some other group in 20, 30 years saying, how do we replace it again? And how do we keep coming back and replacing it every 20 years versus giving it to the county, who will help us going forward to maintain it for ourselves like they do many of our other neighboring communities. So I think what I'm hearing is it's fine to stay in the budget, but we'll potentially not spend depending upon where those conversations go.
Could you clarify again when this pipe was installed that we're using right now?
I don't have off the top of my head, but I can clarify that.
So-
The bulk of our city's system was put in place in the late 50s,
Mhm.
1957 time.
Yeah, and we know those pipes are in really, really bad shape,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Okay, are we ready to move on to moderate? Just a time check, we have about 35 minutes until our 6 PM meeting. You could continue this item to your regular meeting if that's a decision the commission wants to do as we approach the time.
I'm okay moving forward unless we need to break.
Keep going.
All right.
All right, so now we're jumping into the moderate projects, so ranked 45 to 59, and we had about 51 that fall into this category. One note on this slide is the bunker gear replacement. So this kind of speaks to, not all of the nuances are captured in the formula for ranking. The bunker gear replacement is something that's required, for us to provide. So even though that project falls, in the rank of 28 overall with a score of 58, it is essential that we fund this.
Well, now that we're here, I feel like we're going to need to know more about item rank 27, since it's an outrageously large number. And then when you look over to the right-hand column, the number 125 million is bigger than everything else added together that we've talked about tonight. So can we spend some time with that?
Sure. Yeah, that project was from the water threats analysis. So that's that Don Cesar Boca Ciega area. That's looking at Boca Ciega Isle, all of Bella Vista, and then all of the Don Cesar neighborhood. So the cost figure that's shown in there now is based on those prior planning studies that were done. So the solutions that were recommended out of that planning study was adding more drainage infrastructure, adding pump stations, elevating roadways. So a lot of those type of components are what goes into that resiliency adaptation.
Can you tell me what not cost effective means in the grant status column?
Sure. Different agencies look at it differently, but basically they'll look at like a benefit cost analysis to justify if what you're proposing makes sense. And FEMA's world, it's typically a factor of 1. So if you have $100,000 projects in FEMA's BCA calculation, it makes sense to do mitigation up to $200,000. If that mitigation project's more than $200,000, then it's not cost effective to do that. So that kind of draws a line in the sand of, if you want to do resiliency mitigation improvements, at what point does the cost of doing that outweigh the benefit that you're going to receive?
So FEMA said this project is too expensive for the benefit you would receive.
Correct. For the Don Cesar, that one wasn't. That was through the state, specifically for that project. So that was the Division of Emergency Management, and they determined it wasn't cost effective. I would note, some of the information that they look at to justify the cost effectiveness, we didn't have on hand. So a lot of that is like your detailed engineering models and analysis. Some of that information, we provided the planning study that we had, but it didn't include all of the information needed for a BCA. That's something that's part of the project that's underway right now with WSP, is they're formulating specific grant applications to identify are these projects cost effective.
And so the $3 million in new appropriations for 2027, that's anticipating what that new contract with WPA is going to like that's anticipating what's going to come out of that, or is that $3 million for something else that we've already decided to do regardless?
Nothing that's been decided on regardless. Really, those figures are just, ballpark estimates based on those prior planning studies, but what the work that comes out of what WSP is underway with right now, those costs could change. The solutions are going to get solidified, the cost will get more refined. That scope certainly could change.
Okay.
But we felt that is a placeholder to continue. I mean, it's 125 million total. That number could change. It's at least going to be 3 million. So at least that keeps the project progressing.
Here again, I don't know what we're spending the money on. It just says resiliency. So if it's keeping water off the streets, it would be should be in the top priority list from the feedback I've gotten.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for community feedback.
Sure. Yeah, we can share, some of the project descriptions for these projects too, but for these ones specifically, it was looked at a level of service for the 100-year, 24-hour rainfall event, and then assuming, a 5-foot elevation king tide elevate. So basically all the recommended solutions were based around that level of service. If you had a 100-year rain event with a 5-foot tide elevation, we installed these pumps around. This is kind of the level of service that you would expect. And I think the result out of that was 3 inches of flooding at the roadway crown, and I think 9 inches in the intersections from that storm event.
Well,
So that's really what we got to talk is what level of service do we want to address.
So since we're talking about this area in D3, the frustration I heard is more like rainfall and not 100 years. It happens every month, or it happens multiple times a month during thunderstorm season where the streets are flooded, like a foot of water in the street. So what is that called? Is this solving that problem, or?
The 100-year storm event would be more intense than what you're describing now. Right now, the city's code is a 10-year, 1-hour storm event, so that's a lot less intense than the 100-year. So that'd be the minimum that we designed to. Previously, in the city's comp plan, the city's goal was to have the city function for a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. So that's just another.
Would it be possible to look at this and say, well, instead of 100-year, what would this number be if it were for a 10-year?
Yes, exactly. And that's something that we've asked WSP to do in their scope as they're looking at this area. Look at current conditions, look at your mean annual storm, which is your typical summer storm. That's a 2.33-year event. Look at a 5-year, a 10-year, a 50-year, a 100-year. So kind of look at the full range of benefits, so that way when we go and present these to the community, they know what we're designing to is, hey, if you want to have absolutely zero flooding, in a high-intensity storm event, that's going to be a very high-dollar project. If you're more concerned with your everyday summer storm events, and that's the level of service that we're designing to, that's a less cost type project. So I think those are all things that are being looked at from the engineering side, and then we need to go back out to the community and ultimately, get some consensus there.
Yeah, I'm just saying, not me personally, because our street doesn't have this problem. But the feedback I've got is we're trying to just keep these rainstorms from flooding our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of feedback we'll want at the public workshops, not only for the Don Cesar Boca Ciega area project, but also when we get further into the watershed management master plan development. Both of those projects will have series of public workshops, so it's important that we're getting that feedback at that time, so we're designing what the priority is.
So the $3 million that we would be talking about right now going ahead with the 2027 budget would give us that deliverable of knowing the data?
That would come just out of the $800,000 that we're currently contracted with the WSP. That will give us a funding pathway, recommended funding strategy. That'll tell us, what grants that we should pursue, what the recommended scope would be, and estimated costs and timeline to implement. So all of that would come out of that WSP project. The idea would be WSP will get us to the point where we could put this project out for design build and start doing construction in phases. That's another part of WSP's scope, is to phase the project. Right now, we're looking at neighborhoods. You know, how do we get that down to the basin level and phase it? So really, it's just if we wanted to move towards construction and keep continuing, that's what that is a placeholder for.
So Director Mills, the WSP project, I think you alluded to, what's the dollar amount on that? One more time.
791,000.
Call it 800,000. It's underway, right? And out of that will tell us, here's how we think, you should contemplate investing in what I'm guessing is ultimately a $125 million kind of potential project, right? And so again, I'll tell you, I feel like we're a little premature in assuming that we need to start investing in these things until we get past that study that tells us here's how we'd go about doing it. So again, for me, this is something I would hold. And in this case, I wouldn't even put the budget money towards it, because when is this WSP plan complete?
I think the original plan was January of 27, but I think since our start date's pushed back a little bit, I think that'll kick to like March or February or March of 2027.
So roughly this time next year, we'll be having this conversation with the results of that, right? So
That $3 million could go somewhere else for
$3 million could go somewhere else, right? I don't want to keep speaking for everybody, it's just,
No, I agree with that, and especially since I don't even know what the 72 million is for.
125.
Yeah, when you add it up over.
Yeah, right now that number is really just a placeholder based on that old study and the cost estimates for that.
Okay, all right.
It'll be updated with this WSP information.
So what would be the real ramifications in your view of not keeping the 3 million in there?
I guess from my point of view, it'd just be cognizant of the community impact. I know there's, the Resiliency Committee has been working on this project for a while, so I know this is an important priority for that neighborhood. So I would just be, cognizant of that.
Is there anything that you would recommend we act on? I'm sorry. Is there anything you'd recommend that we act on prior to the completion of the WSP study? Like, would you feel confident reacting and saying, this is how I would spend $3 million prior to getting the results of that WSP study?
Not prior to getting the results. I think we need to work through the preliminary engineering and get the foundation built.
Sorry, Commissioner Robinson, please.
No, it's three neighborhoods, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Or 3 neighborhoods, right?
And then this same type of approach would be applied to the other resiliency adaptation plans for the rest of the city.
Northeast, the northwest, and the Paso Grande
Paso
and
Grande,
Pina.
correct.
But we don't have anything allocated
32 is
for
right
those
down there,
yet.
yeah.
So,
I would just say, though, that we need to have assurances that at least we're trying to mitigate that. With 4 inches of rainfall in 1 hour, we're seeing the flooding that you guys have seen and mentioned. We don't have the pumps to pump that out, even temporary pumps right now. We're kind of begging, borrowing, stealing, and moving around as needed. I had them on North Desir. You've had them in Bella Vista and the Don Cesar neighborhood, and it's real. And we get a 30-minute rainfall, and you're literally driving through 8 to 12 inches of water. So I know that the residents that are impacted would feel very strongly against that. I just want to make assurances that we're looking at some kind of triage in the meantime. This is a Band-Aid, I get that. We're not treating the cause, just some of the symptoms. But we need to keep that in mind as well, that our job is to protect the residents and the citizens of St. Pete Beach. So.
Well, we are kind of doing that, right? Because we, at least in the Don Cesar neighborhood, we are already committed to doing phase 2 of the outfalls, right? So we are doing something in the neighborhood this year.
We're doing the tie check valve modification project. That phase 2 of the outfall, I would recommend we don't move forward with those improvements because they could conflict with what comes out of this study.
So in that event, I would say the most important thing is that we know when we're going to get WSP recommendations, and that if we stand firmly on that data, then I think we'll all be happier, because then we're not wasting money.
Understood.
Can I ask, WSP is very specific to Don Cesar, Boca Ciega, that kind of area. I get that it would not, well, I don't know, I'm asking, would it inform the Northeast Regency, the Northeast Region Resiliency Adaptation, Northwest Resiliency? Like, is there something we can infer even though I know that it's not specific to these other neighborhoods, but I'm looking at Rose, well, it's beyond this slide right now, but you've got more resiliency type things of significant 40 million, 37 million, 18 million in other neighborhoods. Would that WSP, I know it's not unique to these other neighborhoods, but would it give us some information that might help us again with planning on those?
It would. I mean, of course, as like the survey, technical information, all that would have to be redone specific to those areas. But your framework on how you're approaching the project as far as phased implementation, the type of engineering that goes into it up front, that could all be replicated and done in those other types of projects as
So in
well.
my mind, I see this as a phased approach, with the first phase getting a WSP study to help us understand how we would approach it in a neighborhood. And then if it's successful and we move forward and we've got a way to approach that, then we could apply it to other neighborhoods.
That's the idea, is get an approach that can be scalable.
And I would say this is actually the second step, because the first step, we've had, over the last 20 years, multiple studies that have suggested how to fix this problem. And I pretty much agree with the things I've seen. And this, however, is different, because this is going to be the engineering, design, and the community engagement, right? So
Right.
different than the studies that have been done over the last 20 years that say, okay, this is what you should do, but we've never been able to do it for some reason.
It's moving it from planning into design and implementation.
So something for you to consider is we've also been trying to we are moving into a project accounting position for you. So it means once the city commission allocates a set number of funds to a project, we will now track those funds within a project accounting format. With that being said, cities who do that strategically also put money away ahead of spending the money when they know the project's going to far exceed what they have in the bank. So it's basically a project account, savings account. So absent, I'm saying this because you could put the 3,000, you could keep it here. You essentially tell us it's a hold and don't spend until we get the study. Unless you see something else in 27 that you actually want to move this cash. Because remember, this is cash. You're sitting in the bank, that you want to move it and spend it somewhere else in 27.
I'm just sitting and looking at another 2 or 3 pages of stuff here, and at some point we got diminishing returns, or there's no way we fund all of this, right? Unless you're suggesting that theoretically we could fund everything that's got a fiscal year 2027 budget?
I'm not saying that.
Okay, then that's what I'm trying, at some point, we've got diminishing returns, right? We're gonna run out of money already, probably, if we haven't yet, we'll be running out of it soon. And I'm worried about setting aside money that we absolutely know we won't spend until the March, April, May timeframe of next year. I get that that's, it's
So
all-
maybe if we hold on this one, move to the next, so we know you have 3 million
Yep.
that you could reappropriate in 27. Maybe we go to is there anything else on here you want
I'm sorry, I do want to ask about the Boca Ciega Drive reconstruction and the roadway rehabilitation.
Okay.
Some of that is FDOT grant, a portion of it, so good that we're getting some money coming in. And I think, is roadway rehabilitation just all others that aren't Boca Ciega and aren't state-owned roads?
If it's the roads that have their own CIP would be Boca Ciega, Gulf Winds, and Gulf Way. Everything else should be in that mill and resurface program.
Oh, so there's an equivalent to, instead of just Boca Ciega, there's a Gulf Winds and a Gulf Way somewhere in here? Is what you're telling me?
Correct.
Okay, presumably lower.
What's the status on 59th these days?
59th, I believe, is being resurfaced this year. I think they just did all the reclaim services. They were wrapping that up, and then we were going to mill and resurface after that.
I'm getting what I would call the biggest pieces of fruit here, so I'm looking at 4 million for Boca Ciega Drive and 1.5 for roadway rehabilitation. Comments on, maybe your thoughts on what specifically we'd be doing with that money in 2027?
So for the roadway rehabilitation, that would be similar to the seawall. We have a condition assessment of all of our public roads, and In our comp plan, we outlined to strive to stay above a satisfactory rating or above, so that's like a 70% out of 100 or above. So it's really just working through the priority list there. Your worst roads, milling and resurfacing those, and then some of your roads that aren't quite in a worse state yet, where you still have an opportunity to apply preventative maintenance techniques, if that's like a fog seal or a crack seal type deal. That's what comes out of that roadway. So it's really preventative maintenance to keep our overall road condition above a 70.
And when was the last time something of that, is it continuously ongoing? Or has it been a while since we've done something like this?
Yeah, just about every year. The last time we had the analysis done was in March of 2025, so post-storm. It was when all the roads were analyzed. And then, as I mentioned, the Gulf Winds, Boca Ciega, Gulf Way, some of those projects that have additional scope elements tied into them are separated from that preventative maintenance program.
Thank you.
Okay, so hold on the 3 million and go to the next slide. Everything else is fine on this?
I guess I should ask real quick. So on the previous page, we saw the reclaimed water lateral service pipe replacements. Does that include the part of the water that's the pipes under the roads?
Yes, yes. Those are the laterals, under the roads that connect to the main line.
So that is why the roads get messed up, I would say. A very large part of what I've seen.
Yes, I mean, your roads will deteriorate over time. I mean, 20 years is kind of your typical service life for pavement design. But the reclaimed laterals breaking, when they break, you have to dig up the road, replace it, either replace the line or just repair it. And if you do repair it, then you have, an asphalt patch, and then over time, that may sink. But a lot of
very short period of time, as a matter of fact.
Mm-hmm. So the idea with our roadway rehabilitation project is we kind of marry that up with our lateral replacement where we can. If we know we have a roadway that is due for resurfacing but also has a bunch of reclaimed laterals that need to be replaced, we'll go ahead and do the reclaimed laterals first and then come behind and do the milling and resurfacing.
So we actually have some roads that we've replaced the inferior pipe with the correct kind of pipe that doesn't
Correct, yeah.
dissolve.
Yep, and we look at that, before we decide to mill and resurface a road, looking at the utilities and, coordinating with those impacted, whether it's Pinellas County. That's something that we do when we're vetting which roadways we're proposing.
I like my fellow commissioners, and I don't think we're going to get through this entire list in the next 15 minutes. And I suspect there might be some breaks needed because we've been at it for a while. What's your recommendation, City Manager?
So you have two options. We could continue this to another day and reschedule, or you could continue to the end of tonight's meeting. That's another option. But you might have a long meeting tonight, so I might recommend the first option of another day this week or next week.
I think it's important not to have a long delay. So if we're going to continue this, I would like it to happen.
I'd rather go tonight and see if we can get it. If we don't, then we'll decide at the end of
All right.
tonight's meeting to continue that one.
Yeah, and and if we continue to another day, I just would like it to happen soon, not more than a week from now, so we can make progress.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll attempt this evening.
We'll try it this evening.
Okay,
Sorry.
awesome. Nope, that's fine.
I mean, yay. All right, are we back at 6 then,
Thank you.
as usual? Okay, thank you.
All right, kids, I'll